taking control, shoveling dirt in every hole. Predators to condemn your soul, watching you and watching me. We're all connected but separated, misunderstood and so frustrated. A million armies of one have invaded, watching you and watching me. We live behind glass curtains and act like nothing's wrong. Soon you will belong. I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We'll expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. The little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. We the people have taken over. We the people are little brother, standing by to dethrone each other, watching you and watching me. Paranoid, the lens is our weapon, desensitized in our lust for attention, democratized by our voyeur obsessions, watching you and watching me. Slaves to perfection, don't let them project you as you are. Feel your every flaw. I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We'll expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. I know you're out there somewhere. This is the new totalitarian state. 1,000 eyes are waiting for you to break. Stay in line, don't make a mistake. We're watching. We watched you for so long. We wait for you to fall. We will expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me.
your experience begin right now. From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio. You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter, @SpacedOutRadio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can follow us on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride as we are live on Spaced Out Radio.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Said the deeper I go, the deeper I fall.
Good evening and welcome to Space Out Radio. Tonight I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us, and thanks for tuning in at spacedoutradio.com and on Spreaker. As once again we come in from the frozen Canadian tundra, battle our way past the wild animals, sidestep Bigfoot, and enter Uncle Jimbo's cabin, stoke the fire, heat this place up, and broadcast you live on this Wednesday night, early Thursday morning if you're on the East Coast. Here at Spaced Out Radio, we are broadcasting 3 hours a night, 7 days a week. That's because we want to be your official one-stop shop when it comes to the supernatural, paranormal, cryptozoological, conspiratorial, and so much more. Like our music? Head to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and you can find out more about the guitar god himself, Ron Bumblefoot THAL, the man they call Bumblefoot, formerly of Guns N' Roses. Check out a couple of his music videos by clicking on the Bumblefoot banner. Also, you can find us on Twitter, @SpacedOutRadio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, you can follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show, and of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. At this time, we'd love to say hello for all those listeners tuning in on the High Plains Talk Radio, in the Spaced Out Radio chat room on Spreaker, along with our fans on Facebook at Euphoria Chronicles, Chronicles of the Unknown, Forest Moon Paranormal, and our flagship chat room, the SOR Space Travelers. Hey, Space Travelers, now that the website is up and running and looking very, very good, you can sign up for the Spaced Out Radio SOR Space Travelers Club. It's only $5 a month. That's cheaper than a Starbucks coffee, and we will be doing monthly prize draws with your name included, have private group interviews, access to a special section on our website, and so much more. Hey, unlike the other guys, we're going to give you a hell of a lot more than just access to our archives. Also, while you're on the website, you can check out the SOR Space Wire. Our news director, Eric Markham, has some great stories that are posted new every day. Tonight's show is brought to you by Rivulet Reiki and Readings, providing healings in person or at a distance. PurplePlates.com, helping heal your body, mind, and soul. The New Agora newspaper is the official newspaper of this show. And the iTunes app, Spirit Storybox, the official ghost hunting app of Spaced Out Radio. A familiar voice is back with us on Spaced Out Radio tonight from Cryptopia.us. Rob Morphy, otherwise known around these parts as our resident crypto historian, stops by and does what he does best. On the third Wednesday of every month, Rob will tell us some grand tales of actual encounters that people have had with creatures, or now robots, of the obscure and unknown. Tonight, though, Rob is taking us in a whole new direction. As it seems robots and artificial intelligence seems to be the hot-button topic these days, we're going to explore Rob's new addition to Cryptopia.us, and of course, There's the resident stories of people being freaked out beyond belief after coming face to face with aliens from another planet. What are the theories behind this? Are they real? Well, that's what our resident crypto expert is here to fill us in about. Rob Morphy, welcome back to Spaced Out Radio. How you doing, my friend?
I am phenomenal. It's great to be back, Dave.
It doesn't even seem like it was a month already. Seriously.
No, time flies, man.
You know, it's amazing because, like, looking at the schedule, it was just, let's see, you were on last month on I believe, around the 16th, 17th, and now we do it again. We're already at the 20th of July. Have you started your Christmas shopping yet? Let's be honest.
I am not even contemplating my Christmas shopping yet.
Oh, me either, man. Me either. But, I mean, Jesus, before we know, it's going to be right there, man. You know?
I know. It always creeps. It always creeps up much quicker than I anticipate, and I'm always wondering why I didn't do exactly what you just suggested. Especially in online shopping, you could just get it all done, and yet I will procrastinate even with all the technology at my fingertips.
Well, you know what's funny is last year, Mrs. Spaced Out Radio and I, we actually started our Christmas shopping around July, and it made it so much easier. I can honestly say that. I've actually done it once and it works. So knowing that I know it works, I'll probably procrastinate and wait about 3 weeks before Christmas this year. You know, that's just the way it goes.
Absolutely.
So what's new around your parts in the cryptid world?
Well, there's all sorts of fun stuff. I mean, it's always just a great influx. And I got to say one thing. I've been getting a lot of great feedback lately from some spaced out listeners and getting some information on some new cases and some new lines, and some of which we'll be discussing in the weeks ahead. So I'm really, really excited about these new connections that I've been able to develop through your listenership. So I'm very excited about that.
Well, that's good to hear. People are paying attention. You know, honestly, I don't even mean that to be sarcastic or sound out of it, but I mean, you just never know if they're willing to contribute, and to hear that they're getting a hold of you, a couple of them, and filling you in on some stories. That every little bit of information helps, doesn't it?
Every tiny bit. I mean, I value it all, and even though I am, and I love the title you've bestowed upon me as a crypto historian, and I cherish it and feel like that is really my main, that is my au revoir in terms of what I've done over the years. I love to be one of the first to chronicle things, too. I love it when it's not just trying to shed new light on classic cases, some of which I've been able to find out information that, has kind of fallen through the cracks and kind of freshen it up for a new generation, but to find stories that have never yet seen the light of day is just as exciting to me and just as important in terms of being a historian, because these stories might otherwise never come to light, and you never know what's going to be an essential part. I mean, it's all a giant jigsaw puzzle, and unlike one that has 1,000 pieces or 2,000, this one is just ad infinitum, but every piece we get helps make a more cohesive picture. So I love being part of bringing new stories to light and helping other people connect when, they might feel, as we've discussed before, pretty lonely in what they've seen. And if they encounter or they read of someone else's encounter and all of a sudden they realize, oh, I'm not alone in this, that can really make a very lonely plight seem a little more tolerable. So I'm very excited to be a part of this and part of bringing these new stories to light.
Have you been following the reports out of Pennsylvania with the apparent sightings over the last couple of years? I believe they're up to 16 or 18 sightings of werewolves.
There's been a lot of werewolf sightings in the continental United States lately. Pennsylvania's just one of them. Obviously, Wisconsin's had a bunch of them for a while, and they're very often lumped in, understandably, with dogmen sightings, because, let's be honest, if you're describing a human canid hybrid, it's a very fine line between what a typical wolfman or lycanthrope would be and a half dog, half human. But yeah, I definitely had my ear to the ground a little bit with these Pennsylvania sightings, and it's a fascinating phenomenon to me, and I really, both in terms of cryptozoology and the hard science of it, and in terms of sociology, I find myself very fascinated that this phenomenon, which, has existed in small pockets, And in terms of werewolves, for centuries, if not millennia, going back to Romulus and Remus in ancient Rome, but why there's a resurgence of it now? And is this actually telling of a biological reality, some migratory pattern, something new that's happening, or if it's also telling of a psychological and sociological aspect of things? And to that end, I must say I'm really intrigued by this basically werewolf renaissance that we're going through right now.
Butch Witkowski, who comes on here the final Monday of every month, he's been hot on the tails of these werewolf sightings and these werewolf cases being out of Pennsylvania. And the one thing that he has stated with a lot of the sightings, whether it's alien, whether it's cryptid, is they always seem to be around or in the area of national or state parks. Are you finding that with your studies as well, with a lot of these cryptid sightings that you deal with?
Absolutely. Well, of course, it would depend on what kind of cryptid you're talking about. But when you're talking about things like Sasquatch or dogmen or werewolves, things that would naturally be wild animals and very likely predators, they just make sense. I mean, these are large swaths of land that, are full of prey animals that are, basically untouched by human beings and protected from human beings. So for, in terms of, swamp apes down in the Everglades to just about any national park you have in the United States, there are cryptid connections, and it just makes sense on the surface because, again, this is basically protected land for wildlife, and so any type of animal, whether it's known or unknown, would kind of have free reign. So there's definitely, for more it's weird to say, but more traditional cryptids, like say basically parts of the, fauna of our nation that, would naturally be dwelling in a foresty area anyway, you definitely get many more reports coming from national parks. And it's kind of important, too, because, it preserves species that we know to be endangered and species that, need protection that we are well aware of, like wolves and other things, that it also offers the same kind of protection for animals that we don't have officially identified yet. So I think it's very important on that level.
How many creatures are out there roaming around the woods today that are believable and that you believe in? Because I know that you take all of these stories, you have to, with a little bit of a grain of salt, because you wouldn't be doing your job if you didn't. But some of these stories are so wild and so imaginary. To hear that they are actually happening, do you believe a lot of these things that you were seeing?
Belief is a very, it's a controversial kind of phrase right out the gate, because that just implies what it is that I'm personally willing to support. In terms of things that I see that I think are worthy of investigation, some obviously are patently ludicrous, and some are much easier to substantiate in terms of, even if it's just circumstantial evidence and good eyewitness reporting, obviously I think there's something to Sasquatch. I mean, the sheer number of legitimate accounts and really impressive tracks that have been made, and to a much lesser degree, some impressive video and photographic evidence, I think there's something to it. Internationally, things like the Oran Pen Deck and things like that. Now, you get into more tenuous things like, say, Bat Squatch, which is a flying, hairy humanoid thing that probably is spawned by tabloid papers. I'll certainly report on it if someone claims to see it, but then I get a little more skeptical, a little more incredulous when it comes to things like that. A, because things that fly are just much easier to spot, and B, because there really aren't any gigantic bat-like species in the United States. So some things I'll definitely take with more of a grain of salt than others, but I would certainly think perhaps the thing I'm most intrigued by in the continental United States right now is the southern Bigfoot, which is not to say that the Pacific Northwest and Canadian Sasquatch, that to me is absolutely a reality, in my opinion. There are real biological creatures that are being represented, in my opinion. But I would think on the converse side, the smaller, notoriously stinky, probably just because of the environment they come from, more chimp-like creatures that are seen throughout Florida and the Pacific or the southern eastern tips of the United States, I find there's a lot of really intriguing evidence for that creature as well, or species, I should say, and maybe multiple species.
Well, I'll tell you, I have not gone on my Bigfoot hunt yet. I'm actually hearing stories, and here's the weird part. And I recall telling you and many of our listeners that there's an area that I am supposed to go to up in my new area of the North Woods here in British Columbia that I just feel that I need to go to. Well, my neighbor, I was talking to him about it, and his name's Tony. He sometimes will run on over here and sit with me in studio, and I'm sure he's probably listening right now. So, Tony, I got cold beer in the fridge beside me if you need to come on over. But the whole point that I'm saying is, where I felt I needed to go to see this creature, it was because before I moved up here, it was almost telepathic that I had this message that this is where I need to go, this is where I need to park. Well, in talking to Tony about, the cryptids and this whole genre of spaced out radio that we talk about, he actually said a couple of his buddies had Bigfoot sightings along and near where I felt a year ago that I was telepathically told, I'm going to say telepathically because I don't know where it came from, but where I was told that I needed to go to have my own sighting and communication with Bigfoot.
That's amazing. I can't wait to hear what the outcome of this odyssey is.
Well, you know what? Neither can I. Like, it feels real, man. It feels real. And you have to be able to just, run with it. When you get something like that, you have to run with it and trust that first initial instinct on whether or not you're going to do it or not. And I'm to the point now where I've seen so much over the last number of years, Rob, that I have to. I just have to. I have to scratch that itch, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm a firm believer, as I'm sure most of your listeners are, and most people in general ought to be if they're not, of trusting your gut. If you have a strong enough instinct, regardless of what this origin is, something deep within inside of you or a power exterior to you, it is a voice you ought to listen to, because usually it's going to lead you in the right direction. So I'm all about trusting your gut instincts.
And let's talk about that, because in this field, Rob, there's a lot of people who question everything we do. We are in one of the most questioned genres of the alternative media that there is. People question the reality of it, the validity of it. Let's face it, how many times have you been told over the years, what are you wasting your time on that crap for? It doesn't exist. From
more
naive.
Than I can count.
Exactly. And so we really get the butt end of the stick when it comes to, people having these topics as a part of their reality until it happens to them.
Right.
So when you are investigating something, how do you know, Rob, when to go with that gut instinct? Because I've asked you a number of times on this show, and I'm not trying to get into it again, but I've asked you a number of times about how do you tell if someone is telling the truth? But let's talk about you for a second here, about your gut instinct. What are you feeling when you're going into a brand new investigation when, say, someone calls you up and says, Rob, you're probably not going to believe me, but I was hunting with my child in the forest, and we were hunting for turkeys, and all of a sudden we saw this creature with 4 arms and 4 legs and 2 heads come around this corner and start growling with us. Our dog who was with us was even so scared he ran off. What goes through your gut when you hear a story like that?
The first thing that I do is I try my best, and this is where maybe my backdrop in journalism comes in a little bit, to go in as a blank slate. We all, as human beings, have just a quick, and it's not even a gut instinct so much as a quick flash judgment whenever we encounter something, whether it's a new flavor, a story that just maybe seems a little too far out there for our own personal taste. We all want to kind of judge something and again, say in your example, if it's a 4-armed growling beast, your first instinct might be like, oh boy, I'm not sure. But what I force myself to do is to instantly wash that away, do not be incredulous or too incredulous, I should say, too skeptical, simply because it sounds absurd on the surface. Talk to the witness, get the information usually in written form first if I can, or on the telephone. Make a personal encounter if at all possible. Find out all the information I can, and then try to interpret it in the context of who this individual witness is, what people have to say about them. I mean, you have to get a pretty wide range of information because you never know when someone's going to speak ill or well, but you can usually get a pretty good gauge pretty quickly about how well respected somebody is and whether or not they're prone to being a prankster or whatever, and then just take it at absolute face value. And there are times I'll walk into a situation that seems to be a pretty standard, say, Bigfoot sighting, which is, say, coming from the Pacific Northwest. Everything seems to, all the ducks are in a row, and then you find out pretty quickly that there's something that just kind of smells fishy about it. Well, on the other hand, you might have, somebody calling from the Midwest that just is seeing this outlandish spider duck. I'm making that up, but just something really weird. But the more you talk to them, the more you realize they're coming from a place of what seems to be a great deal of sincerity. So my first instinct is to not use my instinct, and I don't mean just like I spoke earlier, trusting a true gut, intuition flash. I just mean I'm not going to jump to a conclusion. I'm going to go in there empty and cold as a vessel and take the story as it is delivered to me. And my first job is to chronicle it, and my second job is to judge it, basically.
And that has to be a very trustworthy instinct that you have with yourself, that you're going to be able to judge that character, judge the sighting, judge the experience as to whether it's fact or fallacy.
Absolutely, but you have to. I mean, as a writer, I guess, first and foremost, you have to be able to, just the way a cop would trust their instinct, a reporter would trust their instincts, a host of a show would trust their instincts. You have to a degree, but you have to realize also it's not infallible. And there have certainly been times when I've had instincts about things where, my logical brain screamed out against it, that I eventually changed my mind from what my first gut reaction would be. So, you have to be willing to look at the facts for what they are, but you absolutely have to trust yourself. And I mean, if you don't, then you're having fundamental problems as a human being, much less as an investigator of anything.
And very understandable indeed. But where do you draw the line, Rob? Where do you draw the line in regards to not only your research, but to the point where you have to tell someone, look, you're being absurd here. I've heard a lot of stories, but this is absolutely made up.
Well, when I get into context where there's manifest contradictions that begin to show up, that's one of the first telltale signs, of course. Anyone can relate a story and maybe have some small changes that occur because human memory is a fallible thing, and it is not, like a lot of people think. We don't have photographic images of everything that's happened to us that's under lock and key waiting to be unleashed by hypnotism or something. That's not how the human mind works. But there's a difference between reliving something to the best of your ability and with as much honesty as you're capable of, and somebody that clearly is unspooling a story and trying to kind of enhance it, and the more they tell it, the more embellished it becomes. So contradiction and embellishment is certainly one of the first places where I will call shenanigans, for lack of a better term, where they're clearly trying to exploit it for something bigger right out the gate, which is not to say that people haven't had sincere sightings and then wanted to make a profit off it, but that to me is always kind of shady. That to me, if that's your first instinct, is if they're asking like how much money they're going to get paid for telling me their story, well, then it's done almost right there. That doesn't happen very often, though, I'll say. And other telltale signs that you just learn to look for that just aren't, that you can tell this person is disreputable.
Is there a certain catchphrase or something that all people who are faking it say? Is there just certain things that, that come up every time you're dealing with a fallacy?
Well, no, there's no absolute universal. One thing I noticed when I've had like face-to-face interviews with people that I deem to be pretty shady, and this is almost tipping a hoaxer out there, but a lot of unintentional smiling. Now, I don't mean to say an uncomfortable smile. You're relating a story. You feel like, you might think this is crazy, and then, there's a kind of a sheepish grin, but a constant, like, irrepressible grin, kind of like, oh, I'm having a good one at you. Again, this is more of an interpretation that I've had, but when I tend to see that live action or even hear the perpetual chuckle on the phone, then I understand that you have to gauge how much is it someone being uncomfortable telling a story that's potentially embarrassing to them, and how much they seem to be just having fun with it. And again, that goes back to your experience and instinct. But in terms of a universal blanket catch-all for a hoaxer, no, I don't think one exists, in my opinion.
Do you bounce these topics off of your crew like the other guys?
Well, absolutely. I will defer to them, when we get some testimony, or it's something that's recorded, or if they're, able to be there. But not, and I like to get their feedback separately, and very rarely will we actually be at odds. A lot of times, like my partner Mark Storrs, I'll play a tape for him or something, and I will just not tell him my instincts on it and let him come back with his own feedback. And I would say probably 95 to 97% of the time we are completely on the same page. So it certainly helps to have people you trust to go over it. There's always the danger, sort of, and this is a gross overestimation and analogy here, but kind of like with death row convicts, even the ones that look the most obviously guilty, if you kill the wrong individual, that's something you can't undo. There's always that chance that no matter how absurd something seems, there is a chance that it's real, and so I like to be leery of that, but I just take the cumulative lifetime of work I've done in this, and the instincts I've acquired, and the intelligence that I've acquired, particularly in investigative studies, and to put it all together. And in the end, if something comes out in the wash, I trust it and I write about it. And I'll write about it regardless, but perhaps with tongue in cheek. But I'll spend more time investigating it. And if it doesn't, then I'll sort of let it go. There's definitely been stories I haven't even touched because it's just so ridiculous out the gate.
And on that note, we're going to hop out and take our first break of the night. The crypto historian Rob Morphy from Cryptopia.us and Earth's Mightiest Bastards. I love that name. It's even fun to say, Rob. I have to admit that. It's fun to say.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to hop out for a break. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. Talk to you on the other side.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
Hi there. This is your medium, Joanna, from Spaced Out Weekend, 2 Mediums and a Large. I would love it if you would come and join us with host James Tyson every other Sunday on Spaced Out Weekend. Together, we will take your calls and your questions live. Our goal is to provide you with a positive outlook on deep questions that you may have. Questions regarding love, relationships, money, or whatever else is on your mind. Come and check us out at spacedoutradio.com.
Every Saturday and Sunday night, as Dave Scott wanders aimlessly in the wilderness, you can come hang out with me, James Tyson, in Spaced Out Weekend. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I'll take you along as we talk with some of the best experts in their fields. SpacedOutRadio.com is the place to find us. So sit down, relax, put your feet up. Enjoy the topics like the paranormal, supernatural, intuitiveness, and so much more. Hope to see you there.
Hey everybody, this is Patrick Webster Small, and I'm here to bring you the Webster Phenomena every Saturday night, live at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. If you're looking for aliens and extraterrestrials, well, we've got them. Big and tall, short and small. You're bound to find what you're looking for, so join me on the Webster Phenomena right here on Spaced Out Radio.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the place have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com for mind, body, and spirit, and expect a miracle.
Have you ever wondered about those weird and strange creatures people have reported throughout history? Do you wonder if those stories are real? Me too, and that's why I started Cryptopia.us. Hey, this is Rob Morphy, crypto historian. Join me once a month on Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott, where we will get into the odd and bizarre reports, from the Dover demon to hairy hominids and everything in between. I will break down what people like you and me are seeing at spacedoutradio.com.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost?
Look no further than Spaced Out Radio.
SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click on to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on radio
or our website, including social media.
From commercial spots to banners, we have it all.
Check out our competitive pricing today.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
Want to connect with us online? Find us on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show, on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Instagram, Dave Scott SOR, on YouTube, Spaced Out Radio Show, and our website is spacedoutradio.com. All right, space travelers, here comes the second half hour of Spaced Out Radio. SOR Space Travelers, Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight. It is apperceptive. Apperceptive is your password for the night. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, because it goes a long way in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Apperceptive is the password. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can do so at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, I can be followed at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show, and our website is spacedoutradio.com. While you're there, you can check out Bumblefoot and all our great music. Read the SOR Space Wire along with our blog section. We post them every Sunday as well. What you can do is join the SOR Space Travelers for $5 a month, less than a Starbucks coffee. All you have to do is sign up, and you get access to prizes, a private section of postings on our website, and so much more. We're giving you a heck of a lot more than just access to our archives. Tomorrow night on the show, Kiwani Lapsaritis will join us. We're getting back into the topic of Bigfoot tomorrow night on Spaced Out Radio, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. Tonight, though, the crypto historian is back, Rob Morphy from Cryptopia.us. Rob, welcome back.
Great to be here.
Now, you don't go spreading that password around, my friend.
Fair enough. Mum's the word.
Apperceptive. Bill Cardwell comes up with a good one every night, so we got to remind our listeners to use it wisely. Well, our space travelers, that is. Rob, we talk a lot about strange and weird stories regarding cryptids with you. Doesn't matter if they're 100 years old or more recent. But lately, there's been a lot of chatter about artificial intelligence, whether or not the Greys are alive, or they're soulless, or whether they're AI. You have an interesting story here about abductions by robot-like beings.
Absolutely. And it's a subject that's fascinated me for a long time, and I think it probably almost certainly harkens back to the fact that I was a sci-fi junkie as a kid and remain so as an adult. In full disclosure mode, I've never stopped loving the idea of interaction with robots and I think I'm perhaps, like a lot of people of our generation, perturbed that we don't live in quite the Jetsons-like lifestyle that we had been promised since the heyday. But that having been said, it definitely goes beyond the pale of cryptozoology in that robots are, by definition, non-biological entities. But I've, over the years, collected, along with other paranormal studies I've done, be it in ESP or ufology, other things like that. There's been a lot of really fascinating stories about people who claim to have encountered robots, for lack of a better word, or some sort of automatons. And to that end, I actually instituted a new category for Cryptopia, which is part of our expansion beyond what American Monsters represented, which was just a strictly cryptozoological site. Now we're moving into other realms of the paranormal, and this category is amazing automatons. And so I have started to put together all of these files I've accrued over the years of different encounters with robotic-like beings, and like you say, it's really something that's kind of taking off now. We live in a world where we have 3D printing, where nanotechnology is both discussed with awe and terror in some circles. You had almost every major scientific figure on Earth, from Elon Musk to Bill Gates to Stephen Hawking, talking about the dangers of artificial intelligence, and doing so in a way that I'm surprised more people aren't actively horrified, because, I mean, this, to hear tell, could be every bit as dangerous in its implications as the Manhattan Project was, some 70 years ago. So we are definitely living in a time where awareness of artificial intelligence and the possible interaction with robotic-type beings is probably at an all-time peak in people's awareness.
So the stories that you were learning about these robots, I mean, this seems so futuristic, yet if you go back in time and look at Hollywood, there was always movies about these robots that were out there, and usually they were big tin cans of the crudest production, but it's always been a topic that has scared people, that we may be becoming more useless on this planet the more technology expands. I mean, that goes right back to the book 1984.
Oh, yeah. Even before that, I mean, you've got Fritz Lang's Metropolis. You have illustrations from the 1800s, showing robotic figures, in violent capacities, in the capacities of war machines, which, of course, is becoming more and more true all the time. And then today we live in a world where possibly autonomous drones are actually taking human lives, justified or not. It's just a crazy thought to think that robots are literally doing this. This is no longer a point of fiction. So yeah, I think this is something we've always had as a species. The human race has just been both fascinated and terrified by the potential of these autonomous beings to kind of interact with us, and here it is. It's happening in our lives. Just the way all technology does. It grows to the point where, it no longer seems like science fiction. Just there it is. And we're living in a world where I think we're going to see some really dramatic changes. We already have, but I think, by the time we're seasoned old men, good Lord willing, we're going to probably see a really dramatic interface between our species and non-human, maybe android-type species, possibly artificially intelligent or possibly just deeply integrated into our lives.
Well, let's get into this. Are people seeing a lot more artificial intelligence or robot-like creatures out there? Do you have any stories for us?
Well, I definitely have some historical stories that go back. In terms of more than ever, I wouldn't say so. I think this has been a pretty constant trend, and I find that to be really fascinating. Skeptics will always say that, of course, when people claim to have had run-ins with mechanical creatures and that it just reflects their passion for sci-fi. But really, to me, this is no more or less verifiable than when people, claim to have interactions with Greys or any other alien. And as you pointed out, a lot of people are suggesting now that Greys are some sort of biological robot, or maybe not even biological. So I think this is something that goes back, and it just makes sense. I mean, when you think about what we do as a species, we send out Voyager, we send out Mars probes, we send out Venus probes. This is the most efficient way for fragile biological species to explore not just the cosmos, but the ocean floors, anywhere we want to go that's a danger to us because we are really not compatible with very many environments. And you can imagine the same would be, this said for any other biological species. That would make sense you send a robotic emissary out there. So the thought that we have been interacting with extraterrestrial robots for as long as this phenomenon's been happening, to me, is one that just makes good sound sense.
What is the human activity like when you hear someone report these stories, or if you've read stories about these in the past with these accounts of sightings or experiences with robot or AI type creatures?
Well, rephrase that question for me.
Well, a lot of people are having experiences.
Right.
When you are reading or researching about robot-like creatures or artificial intelligence type creatures, what is the reaction people are giving about these? Is it a little bit more scary than what we are seeing with, say, Frogman or the Dover Demon or something along those lines?
I would say people are certainly frightened by these interactions. There's something very foreign about it. I wouldn't necessarily say more so because, let's be honest, a wild biological entity that you don't recognize is going to be terrifying. Like, say, if you're in the woods alone with a Dover Demon or on some street side by a river with a frogman, you're going to be intimidated. But there's something, I think, that's extra freaky, at least from my perspective when I'm reading it, about an automaton, something that just might not be able to engage with you on an emotional level. I mean, if something else is alive, you might be able to scare it, it might be able to scare you, you might be able to intimidate it, you might be able to communicate with it or show that you have no hostile intentions, and hopefully they'll react the same. There's this kind of potential camaraderie, depending on the creature and its intelligence, that you can hope to establish. You can't hope to establish anything of the sort when it comes to an artificial life form.
So are these aggressive type beings, even though they are artificial intelligence or robotic-like?
It would depend on the scenario. Some seem to be. It's funny. Some of the cases we have tonight, like one of them. Let me just get into this crazy case from 1951. This is a pretty brief one, but it's fascinating. A guy named Fred Reagan was flying his Piper Cub sometime in July of 51 when he says the side of his plane was struck by a glowing lozenge-shaped UFO, so cough drop basically, and it tore through his plane, destroying it, which is one of a handful of cases that we actually have on record of a violent interaction between a UFO and a plane. But he described that he was hurled out into the air, certainly a dead man by anyone's standards, when suddenly he felt what he called kind of the sticky sort of gravitational pull to this UFO that had destroyed his plane. It drew him into the craft, and what he saw was, and this is an amazing thing, but it makes perfect sense when you think of the fact that robots can be any shape, whatever, small glistening beings about 3 foot tall that look like huge stalks of metallic asparagus, which on the surface is patently insane. But then you think about it, this is just an analogy Fred Reagan was making. It might have looked like something else to somebody else, or just basically small monolithic type creatures. Anyway, these things spoke to him in English. Story yet. This is one of the more recent ones I've come across. is that the newspaper account, which was cited by Gordon Creighton, who was this very highly esteemed UFO investigator who was part of the British Foreign Service and really held in high regard by people in and out of the ufology field. He says that Mr. Reagan died a year later after he was cured of cancer, but by a degenerative brain disease that was caused by extreme atomic radiation exposure. So it goes from being a very benign story of an accidental encounter that turned into a life-saving story of some sort of futuristic cure to possibly an unintentional radiation exposure that resulted in a man's death. And according to this account, he died actually in a mental institution. The Georgia State Asylum for the Insane is what is specifically stated. So you almost have to wonder, did his encounter, if this proves to be true, Mr. Reagan's encounter with this extraterrestrial craft and these metallic celery stalks, or not celery, asparagus stalks, did this result in him basically losing his mind, or through radiation exposure, the tissue deterioration, driving him insane and eventually killing him? So right there you actually have the duality of these cases, which is, in some ways they seem as if they're not meant to be detrimental, and in other ways they are horrifically detrimental.
I got to tell you something weird that just happened here. Believe it or not, because sometimes weird things happen. I have two mouses, I guess that's what you would call them in plural, computer mouses, or
right?
You know, because I run off of two computers, and I'm following the chat room, and all of a sudden there's a post by one of our listeners, Gail, who says, "He's gone, Dave. I didn't even touch the mouse to my board, and your sound turned off."
Really?
Yeah. I'm sitting here honestly as you're speaking. I am scratching my head wondering how the hell that just happened, because my computers are very secure. Okay, I have very tight security on my computer, so I don't think it was somebody breaking in, to my computer. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure I would see weird things happening on my screen and my studio and everything like that. But when I looked, as you were speaking, it all of a sudden cut out. And I looked, and my mouse was right over top of where the mute button is for you. And I never touched that, and I never touched that mouse. I am a little bit weirded out by this right now. I can honestly say that. I am weirded out.
I can understand.
Yeah, I could understand if I touched it. But I honestly am sitting here looking at my mouse right now saying, I know I didn't touch it, because I was working on my computer, reading and catching up with the chat, so that way I could see if anybody was asking any questions, and I'm weirded out right now. I can honestly say
clearly I've crossed the line with our robotic overlords, and
yeah, dude, I love it when something weird happens like this, because it catches you off guard. So, and for people who are listening for the first time, okay, I want you to know, I'm not a BSer. I don't make stuff up. I don't do it for ratings or anything like that. But we get some weird things that happen during this show. And this is just the latest one. So I'm going to have to make sure, and I'm just moving my mouse over to an area where the little arrow is far, far away from the mute button. But weird, man. Totally weird. I'm tripping out right now. Maybe your AI gods are after us.
You never know. You really never know when you cross a line. Perhaps it's metallic asparagus. Perhaps it's
metallic asparagus. Could you eat that? And what kind of sauce would you put on those?
Well, I mean, clearly it would have to be a cheese-based sauce, because I will literally eat anything with a cheese-based sauce. That goes without saying. No matter how metallic, minerally, whatever, cheese makes it better.
Well, apparently a couple people are saying, Chris in the Spaced Out Radio chat room has stated it, and I just got a text message from a buddy of mine, Mike, and he said, Wow, just had your show cut out. All I could hear was background chat of something. And I wasn't talking.
Huh.
So we're going to have to monitor this. Make sure
Absolutely.
Make sure the metallic asparagus isn't out to get us. Exactly. This honestly, I'm a little weirded out right now. So we'll have to see if anything else happens during the show. Okay, metallic robots. Let us move on. And by the way, Frank's Red Hot Sauce, Bob says in the SOR Space Travelers, or jalapeno cheese works well with metallic asparagus. That's from Bruce.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Nice piquant flavor. I'm with that.
Well, exactly. And you never go wrong with a little spice. And if not, I got some 1.5 million Scoville unit hot sauce in my fridge that'll do the trick too.
Yeah, you won't taste anything at that point, regardless of what material it's made from.
No, it's hell. I'm going to be honest. It's just, it's living hell. Well, we got to get this thing back on track. I mean, maybe this has to do with the password tonight, apperceptive. So maybe we should blame Bill Cardwell for setting such a technical password for tonight. You know, you just never know. I'm rattled.
True.
I'm honestly rattled right now, my friend. I don't know why. I'm just rattled. So, anyhow, alien robots. Are we seeing more reports of these stories happening? Or are we still seeing a lot of the same old stories with a few of these tidbits thrown in between?
There's always been, let's put it this way, the robotic reports have always represented a minority of reports. There's always been proportionally more reports of clearly biological creatures. Obviously, the preponderance for the last few decades has been, what are commonly known as grays. But be it humanoid, small hairy creatures, I mean, it really runs the gamut. Most of these things are not robotic, but every now and again, and with a great deal of consistency, and not even just, not in the United States, not just in Europe, not just in South America, but all across the globe, there has always been a very specific amount, I would say probably maybe 10 to 15% have claimed to be with robotic creatures. So I think what intrigues me is less so that it's becoming more common, but that it's always had a very stable presence within the UFO literature, within the body of investigative works through different organizations, some now defunct, and that if one need only look to find that it has been a constant presence, even long before, people really were thinking a lot about robots. So I find that to be very, very interesting. Hello.
Have people have physical encounters with these creatures, Rob, as we're about 3 minutes away from break?
Oh, absolutely. People have been abducted. People have been tormented. Children have woke up. Let me deal with this one really quick. This happened in England, in Dorset, a little place called Poole, which is a coastal city, and two brothers, Terence Druce, who's 7, and Broderick Druce, who is 6. Terence woke up to see a triangular creature with 2 crab-like claws extended from black metallic arms standing at the end of his bed. This triangular creature was made up of mini triangles of multicolor. He obviously screamed in terror. His brother woke up just in time to see this thing vanish. They thought perhaps it was just a dream. Their parents tried to just assuage their fears, as any reasonable parents would, until the next day they were walking home across a parking lot and they saw the same triangular thing, this time with a beak-like appendage attached to the top of it, but it was jet black, and it seemed to be following them. Needless to say, these brothers wasted no time in running to get their parents. This is the last time they saw it, but this is another case of something that seems to be robotic. Why this thing, whatever it would be, this weird geometric horror show would torment two young boys from England is beyond anyone's guess, but it's certainly something nobody would want to wake up to. So that's probably one of the least threatening kind of interactions people have had with an ostensibly robotic being, and certainly one of just the weirder, because you have to wonder what purpose could this thing possibly have for wanting to stalk these two boys.
All I'm saying, my friend, is now I'm thinking hot garlic butter. Crab-like hands, I'm thinking garlic butter. I mean, to go with the metallic asparagus. You're making me hungry here tonight.
That's the way it should be. I mean, these things have to be delicious as well as terrifying. Otherwise, I'm not going to report on them.
Could you imagine a cryptid all of a sudden trying to scare the living hell out of you, and you see these crab-like hands coming at you, and you're like, one second, and you run back at it with like a hot knife or a steak knife, a fork, and some hot melted garlic butter. I tell you, that would freak them out. I could see them running like, what the Sam hell is this crazy human trying to do?
Absolutely. It might be our last defense. And this is something I think we should spread the word about to just keep people safe.
I agree. Keep the hot butter around. And you know what? We're going to hop out for a break right now at the top of the hour. The crypto historian's making us hungry here on Spaced Out Radio tonight. Rob Morphy is with us the third Wednesday of every month. He's from Cryptopia.us and Earth's Mightiest Bastards, his podcast radio show. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back right after this.
Greetings and salutations, space travelers, from the Chronicles of the Unknown team.
What is Chronicles of the Unknown? I keep hearing about this thing.
It's a new paranormal reality TV show based right here in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. Follow our team as we uncover claims of activity on the Caribou Gold Rush Trail. You can also follow us here every third Monday, where two members of our team will be available to answer your questions. We'll give you some equipment updates and some of our experiences on the road, right here on Spaced Out Radio on the Spreaker.com network.
Do you believe you've been in contact with extraterrestrials? Have you seen the Greys, the Mantis, or the Reptilians? I am Samantha Mowat, and on the second Tuesday of each month, you can listen and learn from my experiences with off-worlders on Spaced Out Radio's The ET Experience. With host Dave Scott, we'll sit down and chat about what's going on with our friends from other worlds. We'll also try to answer your questions, so please tune in on the second Tuesday of the month, only on Spaced Out Radio.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Did you know that Spaced Out Radio runs 7 days a week? Hi, it's James Tyson from Spaced Out Weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, you can join me and my guests for some great chatter about what's going on out in the universe, or even in that dark part of the basement you really don't want to go back into. Well, let's find the answers to your experiences together. So come on up to Uncle Jimbo's cabin on the weekend. For more information, look us up at spacedoutradio.com.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Attention Spaced Out Radio listeners, for only $5 a month, you can join Spaced Out Radio Space Travelers. Your membership at spacedoutradio.com will give you access to private fan area on the website, get you a monthly newsletter, draws for monthly swag, and a whole lot more. Sign up today to become a part of the Spaced Out Radio experience.
Right here, this is where we divulge the fruit of our research. Here on the Webster Phenomena every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern on Spaced Out Radio. And we give it up to you guys, all the listeners, and the live listeners usually get something special and hang out in the chat room. And we love to have you. So we'll see you every Saturday night at 8 p.m. You know where.
If you're a fan of social media, you can follow Spaced Out Radio on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can also follow us on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. Our YouTube channel, where our archives are stored, is Spaced Out Radio Show. And of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. Welcome back to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. The password for tonight, set by Bill Cardwell in the SOR Space Travelers chat room, is apperceptive. Make sure you use it properly, Space Travelers. We don't want you to get lost. Apperceptive is the password for tonight, so make sure you write that one down. Tomorrow night on the show, we're stepping into the wilderness where we're going to talk Bigfoot with researcher Kiwani Lapsaritis, as well as his wife Kelly, on the topic. That is tomorrow night starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can do so at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, I can be followed at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show, to hear our archives. And our website is spacedoutradio.com. On our website, you can check out the Bumblefoot banner to listen to all our great music. You can also read up on the SOR Space Wire, our daily news wire by Eric Markham, along with our recent blogs that we've written from a great team of writers, including yours truly. And you can join the SOR Space Travelers Club for less than a Starbucks coffee a month. Yeah, just $5. You get access to a private section on the website for your own postings. You get your name automatically put in monthly prize draws, and so much more. Tonight we are talking with the crypto historian Rob Morphy from Cryptopia.us and Earth's Mightiest Bastards. I like saying that for some reason. He comes on the third Wednesday of every month to join us to talk everything cryptid. Welcome back, Rob.
Thank you, Dave.
Now, I'm making sure my mouse little icon there, whatever the damn arrow is called, because I'm not a computer guy. I'm making sure it is far away from the mute as possible so we have no more potential paranormal mutings happening around here. So, that is taken care of. Now, moving on, we have a question from Joe in the SOR Space Travelers Club on Facebook. Joe was asking, Rob, what do you think, if you know about it, about the Flatwoods Monster? Do you think that was a robot?
Yeah, no, of course I know about it. It's really one of the most fascinating cases. It took place in, I think, 1952. And, you know, it has some really fascinating background. You know, it's a creature that's anywhere between 7 and 15 feet tall, depending on which report you read, and it allegedly came out of a house-sized globe UFO. I've often thought that this could very well be a robot. It was described as having a reddish round head with like glowing greenish orange eyes, a metallic kind of body that sort of, it's funny, some of the artistic interpretations draw it sort of like a witch with like folded clothes and a weird spade shape behind the head. Others have that as a helmet. In my opinion, the Flatwoods Monster, which again is a fascinating case, is either an extraterrestrial that's clad in a protective suit, as any, you know, astronaut would be in a foreign environment, or just as likely some sort of robotic creature. So I've often entertained the notion that Flatwoods, or the Braxton Monsters as sometimes known, might very well be an automaton and not a biological creature.
That almost sounds like Predator. being able to cloak itself.
It's a creepy one. A lot of UFO sightings were seen in Pennsylvania that night, and West Virginia and that whole area, and it's really one of the big American cryptid sightings. It's fascinating, and a bunch of kids and a mom and a young Army reservist actually not only saw this thing. As it approached them, they ran away in terror, but they also got exposed to a noxious gas, which is a common occurrence, as we're going to get to in a moment, with a lot of robotic encounters that left them all very sick. So it's a really fascinating case.
Moving on here, because otherwise we're going to spend probably another hour talking about what the hell is wrong with that little triangle between Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania, because there's some screwed up things that are happening around those three states, that's for sure. Let's talk about something that happened in Russia. The Voronezh aliens. You got to tell me about this sighting, because you know I'm such an alien buff.
Absolutely. This is one of those phenomenal sightings that only came about because it happened, and I shouldn't say only came about, but only got exposed in the Western world because it came about near the end of that phase of the Cold War, which was specifically, this event happened on September 27th, 1989, in Voronezh. And to give you the basics of it, there was a public park, and these kids were playing soccer there, and adults were there, and a bunch of people were waiting for school bus. So this really has a plethora of eyewitnesses. And they claim they saw a vehicle, quote unquote, that was about 40 feet above the ground, making some sort of disturbance in the grass below. Everyone stopped to look at it. The craft opened up and revealed a 9-foot-tall entity with no neck, a dome-like head, and 3 eyes, 2 of which were white, and the one in the middle was red and oscillating kind of like a radar scope, they said. This thing had a silver jumpsuit and bronze boots, and ended up getting out of the craft, walking around. It was followed by 2 small box-like creatures that looked basically kind of like that shuffling alien or robot from Star Wars. If you remember the old droid that you cranked up with a wind up and it kind of walked on its own, and it was just basically a box that the Jawas had. This might be even a little obscure unless you got some more sci-fi geeks out there like me, but basically this thing had a bunch of buttons in front, and these larger robotic aliens, the 9-foot-tall 3-eyed ones, were adjusting knobs. People were pretty freaked out by this. They seemed to be going about their own business, collecting soil samples, doing things that extraterrestrial visitors often do, until one of the teenagers approached it. This teenager was evidently vaporized by having an object pointed at him. Luckily, he rematerialized moments later, so it wasn't a disintegration and an unfortunate casualty. And soon after, the tall robots that were basically humanoid but with domed heads, and the smaller box robots got in the ship and disappeared, never to be seen again. But what makes this extraordinary, besides the fact that it's one of the first big accounts to come out of the former Soviet Union at a time when nothing used to come out beyond the Iron Curtain, is it's just the sheer number of eyewitnesses there were and how much press coverage this got, not only in Russian papers, but also throughout Europe and the rest of the world. And it's a very well covered case. You can find, there's an article about it on cryptopia.us, and go there first, of course, but you can find tons of information online, and it's really a fascinating account.
Why do all these sightings from the past always have these creatures that look so antique? They're not sleek or mainstream or smooth. They always seem to have some sort of hardcore, unconventional type shell protecting them.
That's a really interesting question. And now you start getting into some very dicey territory, which a lot of ufologists eventually, like Jacques Vallée and others, get into, which is how much of this represents real technological development from another world or even another dimension, and how much of this is some other species basically harvesting images from our own mind and sort of regurgitating kind of what we expect to see. because so many alien encounters and basically strange humanoid encounters in general tend to reflect basically things that we've seen in horror films or comic books or other things, and that leads skeptics to instantly assume that it's just people with overactive imaginations or outright hosters processing fiction into reality. And on the other hand, you know, the more Jungian way of looking at it is maybe there's these external forces that are just literally inexplicable. Not alien, civilizations, not necessarily creatures that live in the woods, but just another intelligence that occupies the same reality that we do, that are basically feeding on our own fears and imaginations and sort of presenting them back to us for reasons we can't even fathom. I'm not even sure how far I can go in terms of believing that, because once you go into this realm, you know, Keel and Veli and others have talked about ultra-terrestrials, these kind of beyond creatures, almost like demigods, almost like Loki and trickster figures that you find in mythology, that are just basically here to test us and push the boundaries of what we perceive to be reality. Once you go into this territory, it becomes very it's like trying to hold on to an eel in a baby pool full of Vaseline. You know what I mean? It becomes very cryptic and very difficult to wrap your head around. So I tend not to think about it in those terms just because it's scary. But one real viable answer would be that they're getting these clunky images straight from us.
And it's weird that this sighting happened right around the time where communism in Russia was coming to an end. Mikhail Gorbachev was bringing down the walls in Germany. Like, this was during heightened political tensions when communism was collapsing in the area. And to have something like this happening, it kind of makes you wonder if the two incidents are connected.
Well, you know what's more interesting to me is that while you might well be right, they weren't landing in Red Square. They weren't seemingly interested in the politics of Earthlings and what they were doing. They were interested in getting soil samples. They weren't even particularly concerned with the people that were watching them until one kid approached them. And then they used some sort of apparently advanced technology to just disengage this child, this teenager, from reality for a few moments before, bringing him back. So in my mind, what's more interesting is, like, they're just there to get some soil samples. Like, they're just doing a job. They aren't any more concerned about us than, say, a geologist would be a family of prairie dogs if they were trying to get soil samples from the area. Just stay away, do your thing, and we'll do our thing, and then we're going to take off. And that, to me, almost seems more authentic. Like they're working on an agenda far beyond what we can imagine, and they couldn't care less about our politics. I could be completely wrong, but that's kind of the vibe I got from this. And that, to me, is more interesting because they'd be scientists. Of course they'd be scientists, and they'd be more concerned with whatever their personal concerns are with Earth.
And in typical fashion, a scientist who is said to have investigated this and did some experiments denied everything that he was involved in any sort, but the Soviet military at the time was very quick to send troops over there, considering one of the eyewitnesses was a soldier.
Right. Absolutely. No, absolutely. They have to cover something. You can't have this many people seeing something this astonishing and not take it as a tacit threat to national security. It is. And, like you say, one of the eyewitnesses was a soldier. And so, and they apparently attacked a human being. Now, the fact that this boy ended up unscathed, thankfully, is a good thing, but it doesn't negate the fact that they were able to disintegrate and then reintegrate him. So, and it's not like it's just a handful of kids. Not to say that kids can't ever make reliable witnesses, but this is a group of kids and adults and just all sorts of people from all sorts of classes and backgrounds, and they just saw something that was utterly unbelievable. So of course the government had to figure it out, and when they couldn't, and it's, as often happens in these cases, and I almost have a tendency to think that I'm not entirely sure the way most people think that the governments, the big governments of our world really know the secrets of UFOs and just refuse to share them. Part of me thinks they might be almost as in the dark as the rest of us. I think they might have recovered some craft. I almost certainly think they know more than the average person, but I think part of the fear is that they can't stop or control or really understand this any better than your average UFO investigator. And one of the reasons they keep quiet about it is because to admit tacitly that there is nothing you can do, that this phenomenon exists, that they're actively able to interact and do whatever they want and they can't do anything, is even more terrifying than keeping this veil of supposed secrecy over complete knowledge. That's just a personal opinion, but to me it's one that almost has a lot of plausibility.
And you can actually question whether or not they were benevolent or malevolent, because if there were that many witnesses and these aliens really wanted to harm from their duties of whatever they were doing at that time, they probably would have taken those people out. I mean, yes, they did kind of zap the one kid, unfortunately, for getting too close, but they brought him back like nothing happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt that had they had a mind to, these entities could have easily wiped out everyone in this park and beyond, probably. And it's not unheard of. I mean, you know, I remember watching old episodes of Jacques Cousteau where they would actually throw dynamite on coral reefs to collect fish samples. And I mean, he's one of the great naturalists, you know, in history, and a man whose work I admire greatly. But even back then, it was accepted just to kill a bunch of things to chronicle them. And it doesn't look like these creatures or robots or whatever they may be have that intention. They could easily do it. They could easily just take huge groups of us and throw us in museums or, you know, taxidermy studies or whatever, but they don't seem to, generally speaking, want to do that. And A, that's much to my great relief, and B, I think it shows that they really aren't really interested in harming us in any way, that they have a completely different agenda, one that seems to be unfathomable to us as a species, at least right now.
Were there reports of any radiation or any type of evidence left behind by this ship or these creatures?
You know, I'm not exactly sure. I'm sure they did extensive tests. I wouldn't be surprised, but a lot of times, you know, there are some elevated background radiation and you know, marks found, but those are usually inconclusive. You know, I mean, they found it in the Rendlesham case, they found it in other cases, and in the end, that really doesn't change anyone's opinion anyway. They say it's a, you know, a gopher hole, or, you know, they say, oh, it's just, you know, slightly elevated background radiation. But in this case, honestly, I don't know.
I'm just reading up on it. Apparently, one scientist stated that there was an above-average presence of radioactive isotope cesium, and this university professor quickly dispensed the idea that this was very significant. So we'll just update that right now with that, because...
Well, that's good. I mean, I love to hear that there was real evidence of something that existed, because trace evidence is clearly the best, you know, evidence that we can have, short of actual interaction with an extraterrestrial. So I'm delighted to hear that, though I'm sure most skeptics would be unmoved, you know,
of course,
by anything short of carcass. Yes,
of course, you know, because nothing exists, yet they believe in air. You know, anyhow,
yes.
Getting back to this topic, when something like this significant happens, there always seems to be a major influx of UFO sightings in that area. Did that happen in Russia as well after this landing?
Very likely. I don't know what might have surrounded this, but when people read about a case like this, particularly in a specific region, then they are more likely to look up, and they are more likely to see things they don't recognize, whether or not they are genuinely anomalous or not, and then they are more likely to report them. So regardless of where and when, if a big sighting like this is reported, the UFO sightings invariably go up in that region. Maybe because it's actually the site of a flap, where, you know, things are going on for a certain period of time, like in the Hudson Valley in the 80s and other places, and also just because more people are looking and more people are wanting to see.
So I'm just reading up here on this, and this is an interesting story. I'm going to paraphrase here. In the immediate aftermath of this event, the TASS newspaper attempted to pass the story off as non-fiction, with the official communist newspaper defending its decision, saying its coverage was motivated by the golden rule of journalism: the reader must know everything. The newspaper was repeatedly asked whether the report was in jest and were repeatedly assured it was not. Now, when you have a communist-style newspaper and communist journalists who basically are not allowed to print anything that makes the country look bad, look weird, or look out of control, this is significant when the journalism overtakes the actual communist golden rule, which is cover things up.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, I mean, this time was a very tumultuous time in Russia. So you're right. I mean, the fact that it could break out at all is a pretty staggering feat on its own. And then the 90s, of course, were a golden era for, you know, former Soviet UFO secrets to finally get released. Unfortunately, under Putin, it's clamped back down quite a little bit, but for a short time there was a really good exchange of information between UFO investigators and other, you know, investigators of all sorts of things, and luckily this one fell through the cracks, and it is impressive that it did, because you're right, the state-sponsored you know, literature was designed only basically for propaganda for so many decades, and it's a miracle that this got out at all.
I have a question from Bill Hauser in the Spaced Out Radio chat room on Spreaker, and this is a totally different subject compared to what we're related to, but I think it's interesting. He is asking, Rob, what do you know about the Michigan Triangle and the sightings of cryptids in that area?
Well, I have to admit I'm not an expert on the Michigan Triangle, but I do know, like so many others, it just seems to be this, and we've covered triangles in the past, Dave. This nexus of these different forces, some of which may be known, like ley lines and magnetic forces, some of which we probably can't fathom, where it seems like it's just easier for things to come through and people to maybe disappear into than it is in other geographic locations.
Joe has a question in the SOR Space Travelers room here. Rob, a lot of people disappear every year. Maybe the aliens are taking us like we take wild animals. What is your opinion on that?
I've always thought that an alien abduction scenario, as it's played out over and over again, as we've read about for decades now and seen documentaries ever since Betty and Barney Hill, plays an awful lot like a group of well-meaning scientists coming down in a helicopter to tag, say, an elk. You know, they get knocked out, they get maybe transported to an area that they don't know how they get there. They're surrounded by these strange species that are trying to calm them, and with limited degrees of success, they get tagged and released back into the wild, basically where they were discovered. Only, you know, and if they were conscious enough and intelligent enough to communicate their ordeal to other elk, maybe they would sound a lot like human abductees. And so I find that that's a pretty solid analogy, because I mean, this is what our scientists do, and they do it with completely benevolent intentions, or intentions that are there to monitor these species for their betterment in the long run. But it doesn't mean it's not terrifying for the individuals of that species that are basically, you know, abducted, tagged, and released. And so, yeah, I think that analogy is a really valid one.
Getting back to Russia here for a minute, Eric is asking a journalist question, so I'm going to get you to put your journalism hat on.
Okay.
Would the Russian media use a UFO flap as a distraction, or would they more likely cover it up to ignore it?
Is this like during Soviet era or modern era? Well, modern era.
I would say
I
would say that would be in the Soviet era.
Absolutely, they would use whatever it was that suited them at that time. If covering it up would help conceal some sort of revelation they don't want getting out there, they would do that. If using it to hide some sort of a weapons test or any number of things they might want to conceal, I wouldn't and I'm not just throwing the Soviet Union under the bus too. I would say the United States would probably do the same thing. But especially in Soviet-era politics, they would do literally whatever. And when you control the media, you control every piece of the message that's going out there, and they would do anything that suited them at that time. Without hesitation, I would say that. So it would depend entirely on the circumstance, but they would certainly... they would use a UFO flap to cover up something militaristic, or they would just cover up a UFO flap or a crash or something like that if they wanted to keep this a secret because they wanted to maybe use the technology to enhance their own, or who knows what the agenda might have been.
We got time for one more question, as we got about a minute and a half before we're going to go to break here at the bottom of the hour. Chris is asking, Rob, how do you feel about Britain and some other countries starting to declassify UFO encounters?
I think it's good. I think it's past due. I also think that we are probably not getting the complete picture. I think that even these countries that are claiming to blanket declassify all of their files, what they're doing is probably releasing the equivalent of like the American Project Blue Book files, in that cases that are already well known, probably pretty well defined in the literature, have been covered in different books and by different investigators. And I doubt we're really seeing anything that's going to be a great revelation. Those cases that may be a stunning revelation, those that might deal with downed UFOs and recovered extraterrestrial spacecraft, these things we wouldn't be seeing. So I'm happy about it in terms of getting more information, especially for someone like me that wants to collect and chronicle it, but I absolutely do not believe we're getting the full picture even through these mass release of UFO files.
How much do you think they're actually showing us? 5%, 10% of what's going on?
Oh, I bet you they're showing us a considerable more. I bet maybe 85%. I bet you they're showing us a huge amount, because a huge amount probably comes to very little. But it's that 15% that would be really intriguing and earth-shattering and change the way we perceive reality and change the way the masses look to the skies. And that, to me, is the percentage that they're probably still keeping under wraps.
And on that note, we're going to step out for a break here at the bottom of the hour. Rob Morphy, the crypto historian, is with us tonight. He comes on the third Wednesday of every month right here on Spaced Out Radio to give us a little update on crypto history from his website, cryptopia.us. You can also hear him on his podcast, Earth's Mightiest Bastards. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back right after this.
Have you ever had an extraterrestrial experience? One you just couldn't explain? Well, maybe I can help. Hello, I am Samantha Mullet. On the second Tuesday of each month, I will join Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio to bring a human aspect to ET contact. It's something I've lived with my entire life, and I'd love to help you understand. Let's share our experiences. The ET Experience, the second Tuesday of each month, only on Spaced Out Radio.
Fairies? Bigfoot? Dogmen? Trolls? Goblins? Hey, if it's cryptid in any way, I'm looking into it. Hi there, this is author Ronald Morphy, also known as Spaced Out Radio's Crypto Guru. Join me every second Wednesday of the month on Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott, where we will talk about the stories people call tall tales. I will fill you in on the latest sightings and the hidden histories that are causing quite a stir. You can find everything at spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there, this is Jolene with Rivulet Reiki and Readings, and I want you to relax. Let me help you chill out and get in touch with your body, mind, and soul. In this busy world, sometimes we need to let go, and this is where I can help. Visit my website, rivuletrndr.wix.com/rivuletrndr, or my Facebook page, Rivulet R&R, to set up an appointment for relaxation, Reiki, or readings. No matter where you are, it's time for you to make time for you.
Would you like to expand your clientele? Have you ever thought of online radio advertising? Check out spacedoutradio.com to get your name out there. Our listeners support those who advertise with us, so why not give it a try? We have the most competitive advertising prices out there. Just click on the advertising tab on spacedoutradio.com and contact us today.
Are you an ET experiencer, but you just don't know what's going on? Are you too timid or shy to discuss it with anyone? Maybe I can help. Join me, R. Keith Andrews, the first Friday of every month on Spaced Out Radio, and I will help you to find the answers you're looking for. Together, I will help you understand the off-worlders and the true meanings behind your experiences. All you have to do is join us in the Spaced Out Radio chat room. See you there.
Every Saturday and Sunday night, as Dave Scott wanders aimlessly in the wilderness, you can come hang out with me, James Tyson, in Spaced Out Weekend. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I'll take you along as we talk with some of the best experts in their fields. SpacedOutRadio.com is the place to find us. So sit down, relax, put your feet up. Enjoy the topics like the paranormal, supernatural, intuitiveness, and so much more. Hope to see you there.
Hi there, this is your psychic medium Joanna, and I would love it if you would join us every other Sunday on Spaced Out Weekend. With host James Tyson, we'll bring you personal psychic messages on two mediums and a large. Questions about love, life, career changes. We would love it if you would come and join us live. Call in and listen in for the experience. Allow us to open the doors to your other side. Two mediums and a large, heard only on Spaced Out Weekend at spacedoutradio.com.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
Do you have a topic or a guest that you'd like to hear on Spaced Out Radio? Let us know at spacedoutradio.com, where you can sign up to become a Space Traveler member today. Or you can find us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on our Facebook page, Spaced Out Radio Show. Welcome back to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us. Bill Cardwell has set the SOR Space Traveler's password at apperceptive. Make sure, Space Travelers, you use your password correctly and without hesitation. Apperceptive is the password for tonight. Tomorrow night on the show, we're talking Bigfoot as we bring in investigators Kiwani and Kelly Lapseritis. They will join us tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time to talk about the legend of Sasquatch. You can follow us on Twitter if you're a social media junkie like I am, by going to at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, I can be followed at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. And our website is spacedoutradio.com. While on our website, join up for the SOR Space Travelers Club. It's only $5 a month. That's less than a Starbucks coffee. And with that, you get some entertaining ideas. The other guys will just give you access to your archives, not us. You get a private section for posting on our website. You get a private monthly newsletter. Your name automatically gets put into a prize draw monthly, which will happen this month on July 29th, and so much more. So sign up for today. Tonight we are talking with our resident crypto historian, Rob Morphy, as the crypto historian comes on the third Wednesday of every month. You can also find Rob's website, cryptopia.us, and his podcast called Earth's Mightiest Bastards. It's a good one. Rob, welcome back.
Thank you, Dave.
We're going to stay in the field of ufology here. I would love to know what you have learned about the Robert Taylor incident.
This is an awesome case, and a terrifying one, and a really, really unique one, because this involves non-humanoid, evidently robotic creatures. And it comes to us from a man named Bob Taylor, who was a man who worked for the forestry department, like very well regarded by his peers, the local police, and his wife and kids. He was not a man prone to flights of fancy, as is so often the case. And so what happened was, on the 9th of November in 1979, he was walking his dog in some forest near Livingston in Scotland, which was very near his home. And as he was walking through the woods down this logging path, he saw this circular kind of object, I would say maybe about 10 to 12 feet tall, sort of fading in and out. Like he could see the woods behind it, and then the thing would become solid, and then it would phase back out, like almost as if it was maybe interdimensionally traveling. It's difficult to ascertain what it was doing. Perhaps it was a camouflage that was coming or going. But basically, this circle of what ended up looking very metallic, sort of like pewter, manifested itself completely. And at this point, two round, about 30 inches in diameter, metallic balls dropped out. They had long protuberances, sort of like, he compared it to sea mines, like the mines that would have been floating in the ocean during World War II and around that era. These things rolled towards him, apparently either controlled by something within the UFO or of their own accord. He didn't know what to do. He kind of froze in terror. They stopped in front of him. They each shot these long antennae type things towards him with clamps at the end. They grabbed the top of his trousers, which are these really thick police-issue trousers that he had, his work pants, that were, designed to be tough for forestry duties. And at that moment, they shot gas into his face. He was knocked out instantly. When he came to, he realized that there were tears on the side of his pants where these clamps had gotten him. He was bruised, dizzy. He basically barely made his way home, explained what happened to his wife, who was shocked but knew, again, that he was not prone to having, any interest in science fiction or even ufology. He was a man very grounded in reality and the force. They instantly called the police. The police did a very thorough investigation, arguably one of the most ever, and the only one in the British Isles that I know of that deals with an assault that directly came from a UFO. They found that they couldn't figure out how these tears appeared in his trousers, which are still part of, I believe, the police's archive to this day. And what they found when they investigated the scene, of course the UFO was long gone, was that there were pock marks in the ground and tread marks that looked like it was made by something very heavy. But the weird thing was they didn't go anywhere and they didn't come from anywhere. They were just there in that area. And no one could explain, not the police, not anyone else, how these heavy marks could have ended up here without the thing actually having been driven in or driven away. Plus the marks didn't resemble any of the logging equipment that ordinarily would have been used in that area. So basically, everyone came, and to this day, the people that are, still around, unfortunately, Bob Taylor's long since passed, but the people that knew him insist that this is a story that was not made up, as ludicrous as it might sound on the surface. And it's one of those stories that, again, deals with ostensibly robotic entities seemingly attacking, though not doing permanent damage to a human being, and using gas, which is, again, something that you hear of time and time again, to subdue their human quarry.
That is scary. That is scary that this thing had almost like tentacles in order to try and grab a hold of this gentleman.
Yeah, no, they clearly had something that were designed to subdue a human being. These things came out, clamped on, tore through this heavy fabric. Even the police mentioned later that whatever grabbed lifted up. So it was a very strange sort of motion for something. It's not like you would just catch it on some bramble. They were like clearly two big heavy flaps of fabric ripped up and out, which is strange because that just wouldn't happen through natural wear and tear. So it's very interesting. It's very interesting, and you have to wonder, why did they attack him? Why did they knock this human being out? And what might have happened while he was unconscious?
What was he doing in the area? Was he just on patrol, or were there reports that there was some sort of strange lights, or was he driving along and saw something weird?
No, he was just walking his dog. He just drove to this wooded area where he liked to walk his dog. He was a forestry professional, and he just enjoyed being in the woods. He had no idea of what he was going to encounter. This was a patch of land that he had traversed many times, according to his children and wife, and he was not expecting anything that day out of the ordinary. And obviously, as it so often happens in these cases, when you're least expecting it, you have an encounter that changes your entire life.
Was it something where you said he was very familiar with the area? Did this happen in daytime? Was it the evening or at night?
It was the daytime. It was the daytime, and he was just walking, and at first he was more intrigued. And here's another thing, too, and this kind of ties in with other paranormal kind of events, sometimes with demonic things. There was a horrible scent that accompanied this. Now, obviously, part of it might have been the gas he was exposed to. He compared it to burning brakes, but, you know, as I'm sure you've run across in your investigations, you know, be it demonic encounters, Bigfoot encounters, some alien encounters, though much rarer, people have this profoundly awful smell that they deal with, and you have to wonder if there is any connection, and if so, what it might be, or if it just happens to be the after effect of this noxious fume that was, you know, injected into him or at him that made him fall unconscious. But I find that to be really interesting. But yeah, it's a crazy daytime encounter, and I, you know, as a guy that likes to walk through the woods myself, I mean, that's the last thing you're expecting to see.
Oh, trust me.
Take your dog for a walk.
Trust me, I know very well. My first alien encounter happened at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You don't expect it in the daytime. You think that these are only things that happen at night, yet there it is, in plain sight, in plain area where you don't expect. You've been there a number of times, like I was when I saw my first extraterrestrial with Samantha Mowat. And you just do not expect that stuff to be plain as day, no pun intended, right in front of you.
No, you never do. And how could you? I mean, how could you possibly prepare yourself for it? I mean, at night, difficult enough, but in the light of day, that's when all of the strange things are supposed to be banished, and when our minds tend to fall to the mundanity of the world around us, and then there you are. Like, be it your experience, be it Taylor's experience, you see something that is unreasonable by all logical perceptions, and yet there it is.
How was he traumatized by this event? Because obviously there was a big investigation. When something like this happens, it gets the government, the military involved. He was a very well-respected person in his own law enforcement. How did life change for him? Do we know?
Yeah, there are definitely reports, and he is one of the few lucky ones. He apparently remained relatively unaffected. He had faith in his senses. He was surrounded by people that loved and supported him and absolutely believed him and knew that he would have no reason to lie. And, you know, once the furor around it died down, and obviously it was a pretty pronounced one for a while, especially because not a lot was happening in that region, and that got international acclaim. But basically, when all was said and done, the people around him and the people in his community, the people that a lot of times turn against those that see something unusual, accepted at face value that it was an unexplainable event, that he would not lie about it, and they just sort of let sleeping dogs lie, which is absolutely the exception to the rule, as you well know. And so he's one of the lucky ones. He wasn't really profoundly, you know, detrimentally changed by an experience like this, as unfortunately so many are.
Were there a lot of UFO sightings in the area when that happened, or right after, or was this almost like a one-and-done type event?
This is a fairly isolated incident as far as my knowledge goes. I have to admit, I don't know for sure if there was a flap that followed it, but in terms of the research I've done into this case, there really doesn't seem to be that much surrounding it. This seems to be a really interesting case of something basically phasing into reality, either that or, like I say, it's sort of camouflage protocols, either breaking or for some reason turning off for whatever reason. And then, of course, you know, makes you wonder about the origins. I mean, again, that falls back, is it extraterrestrial? Is it interdimensional? Is it time travel? I mean, there's so many options. It's literally as broad as the imagination is willing to go. But why did this thing fade into reality? Why did these objects come out? Why did they decide they needed this man unconscious instead of just scaring him away or just letting him do his thing? You're left with so many questions, but in the end, they didn't do him any permanent damage, and he was able to get on with his life.
You mentioned that there was evidence that looked like there was a craft there, ladder-shaped marks, some sort of tire track almost.
Yeah, tread marks.
Were there any footprints of any beings or anything that were noticed, or did that just not come out in any report?
It didn't come out in any report, but there wouldn't have been traditional footprints anyway, unless, of course, something happened after he was knocked unconscious, because the objects basically had long prod-like appendages that they were rolling on. So they found little holes in the ground that might have been attributable to that, but no footprints in the sense that, we would recognize footprints from an animal or a human being.
That is crazy. Did he ever have any other sightings after this, or was it something that was just a one-time experience?
Just a one-shot deal. Just a man that, was very happy with his life, his family, his little corner of the world, who got exposed to something that just went beyond the pale. He dealt with it, and then, by all accounts, unless he was keeping something from the press or the rest of the world at large, never had another out-of-the-ordinary encounter again. And that, of course, is really how it often happens with people. They just have this one brief moment where they are confronted with the unknown, and sometimes it fundamentally changes you, and sometimes you just pack it away and try not to think about it. I mean, I've encountered both kinds of witnesses, and he seems to have been the latter.
When there are situations like this, Rob, there's always the skeptics who think they know better, who read the evidence via a paper without going to the scene and checking it out for themselves, let alone being there as it happened. What were skeptics trying to pin on him?
Well, the skeptical reaction was that he was perhaps a victim of temporal lobe epilepsy or some sort of maybe a mild stroke, where sometimes you can see a bright flash of light, which of course does not in any way correspond to what he saw, which were very distinct corporeal objects that looked, like he described, exactly like mines, ocean, going mines. And they thought that perhaps that, because of the smell, sometimes smells can be associated with those that have seizures, and that, in the course of some sort of attack, that he hallucinated his interaction with the UFO and the mine-like robotic creatures. But to me, this is ridiculous. I mean, I think people have even gone so far as to say, like they often do with UFOs, that he saw Venus, which, a slightly brighter glowing object in the sky can in no way explain what he saw. So to me, as often is the case, skeptics, or as I like to call them, professional debunkers, because I myself am a skeptic, which means I like to look at things impartially, but people that their whole reason for existence is to debunk things, they will cling to theories that are 10 times more absurd than the actual reality, as bizarre as it might seem, to try to dismiss anything that's beyond the pale or beyond their grasp of reality, and in so doing they end up looking like fools a lot of times. And in this case, I think everything from the epileptic solution to the Venus solution it goes right out there with swamp gas. It's ridiculous.
It always amazes me where the skeptic comes up with these ideas, because not only were they not there, they rarely talk to the people who were on first-hand responders, and never seem to talk to the witness besides reading their quotes in other reports and not getting the story firsthand. As someone who is in this business with trying to talk about these topics at a legitimate level, how much does that bother you when you see these skeptics who refuse to do the homework because they are so adamant that this could never have happened?
It's completely frustrating. It's ridiculous, and it gets the bile up in my gut. And again, I won't even give these people the respect to call them skeptics. They're debunkers. Let's call them what they are. They aren't there to skeptically, with an open mind, look at the evidence impartially and say it is very likely this or it is possibly that. Like the great Arthur C. Clarke, the author of 2001 and a man who studied a lot of paranormal mysteries. He was a man that I would consider a skeptic. He would keep an open mind, but he would use the logic he was born with to suss out whether or not he thought something was likely. These people, like Shermer and the rest, these people that write for Skeptical Inquirer, I'm not trying to throw everyone under a bus, but these people are professional debunkers. Their only goal is to take anything that doesn't fit in a very nicely wrapped version of reality and find a way to disparage it, to disparage the character of the witnesses, to disparage anything. And if it's a professional pilot, then they're like, well, pilots can make mistakes too. No matter what caliber of the person they're talking about, they just tear it down. And I find this to be asinine, because really all I've ever wanted people to do is to look impartially at the evidence, not to be a true believer who goes in all doe-eyed wanting to accept anything that's told them, and just don't go in you know with like a concrete head that you refuse to accept anything new. Just look impartially at the evidence. And these people that call themselves skeptics are not skeptics. They are debunkers, and they should be called for what they are.
No, it always amazes me, because I was actually a part of a, they call themselves a skeptic group. In my opinion of a skeptic is someone who believes there is plausibility there, but they just need the proof to understand. There is a huge difference between what a skeptic is and, like you said, a professional debunker or a five senses person that only believes what they can use with their five senses.
Absolutely. There's a huge difference. And all scientists, anyone who's intelligent, rationally looking at the world, should be skeptical, and it's the way it should be. You should look at it for what it is, weigh the options accordingly based on the evidence that you're presented with and your own perceptions, and then make decisions based on that, while leaving allowances for the fact that you might not have all the facts. That's just how rational human beings should exist. But people that will instantly take an adversarial approach on anything that is not laboratory-based, and do everything they can, like you say, often not looking at the facts, often not talking to the eyewitnesses, often not even studying all the circumstances, and just do their best to flat-out dismiss it or to make people look silly. That, to me, is not only hurtful and asinine, it's just ignorant, and I've just got no room for that.
I think the biggest disappointment is here they are trying to hurt people's reputations without knowing the facts or even having the opportunity to review all the facts.
Absolutely. And but again, their agenda is not to come to a conclusion based on facts. Their agenda is, much like the Condon report, to have a preset conclusion long before you've looked at the evidence, and to declare something as false for whatever reason you have, and to do your best to make anyone that would lend credibility to the field, in this case, ufology, like an idiot, a drunkard, or a fool. And so to me, that is just, it's unforgivable and it's unscientific.
When it comes to a case like this, where you have someone who is professional, you have someone who understands how an investigation works, you have someone who is of, the proper duties of wearing a badge and being part of law enforcement, does this case make the skeptics look bad, in your opinion, that they are refusing to acknowledge his personal background with coming up with things like epilepsy or a heart attack or something along those lines, rather than looking at the facts that this is a person who's never doctored a report, never had anything strange happen in that area, and, took basically an oath to uphold everything that is supposed to be right?
Well, it doesn't lend any credibility to their cause when they are basically pulling medical terms, out of thin air, just to basically they're coming up with nothing that, say, they're not talking about Taylor's medical conditions as they would know them, or talking to a doctor. They're randomly going through WebMD to find what kind of medical conditions could induce a hallucination, and then retrograde suggesting that he might have suffered from it. That, to me, doesn't forward anything. It doesn't help anything. And to me, this is, they act like they are these paragons of logic, but really, skepticism of that mold, the debunker mold, is almost like a religion unto itself. The faith is reality is grounded in what we know, and nothing else can be revealed. And so I must do everything I can to make sure nobody, just like a religious zealot would, accept it, exactly like they would. And not even reverse, I was going to say, but they refuse to let anything break through their version of reality, regardless of the evidence at hand. And to me, that's no way to get to the truth.
Rob, we have about 3 minutes left before we have to go to break here. When it comes to the Robert Taylor incident, is there anything that stands out from that encounter to encounters that we have heard on this side of the ocean?
Well, yeah, there's definitely a parallel in one way, and this is something I'll be discussing more in a minute, of the use of noxious gases. To me, I find this to be a really interesting technique that seems to be employed by robotic extraterrestrials to subdue their victims or people that witness them for whatever reason. And another thing I'll say, not so much how it correlates to things that happen on this side of the pond, as it were, but what I find really interesting about this case is that it's a distinctly non-humanoid entity, and I because a robot would have no reason. Well, aliens in general would have no reason to be humanoids, but robots in particular, I find it really interesting that this seems to be a piece of technology that's suited to do what it's supposed to do, which is apparently clamp onto a person, knock them unconscious, but that it doesn't have to have unnecessary parts or to have to look android-like or human-like to pull it off.
Do you think we're going to start seeing more and more robot-like extraterrestrial contacts from people? Do you think these experiences are only going to increase as we apparently get closer to disclosure?
I don't know. I know that it's been consistent, and that's the thing I find most fascinating, that it has always been a part of it, and not the major part of it, but a consistent percentage of the sightings have been of the non-biological type, and to me that bears research, because let's be honest, what we do as a species is we send our technology out, because our technology can survive in environments that we cannot, and it can probe places that we simply are incapable of going to, and it can live longer than us. So to me it would just make sense that we would still see this as a consistent part of the exploring of the universe, whether it's us sending things out or people sending things to us.
Very interesting. This whole robotic aspect that we've been going on tonight is absolutely head-scratching. Absolutely head-scratching, my friend.
I agree. And fascinating, and kind of it makes sense. Like I say, this is the one way a fragile biological species that can only live a finite amount of time can gather information from the outer reaches of the solar system, the galaxy, whatever expanse it's capable of reaching with its technology, and it really just makes a lot of sense to me.
For sure. And on that note, we're going to take a break here. At the top of the hour, Rob Morphy is our guest, the resident crypto historian of Spaced Out Radio, and his stories are always fantastic when he comes on. We got 1 hour left with the crypto historian, and we'll be back right after this.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Every month on Spaced Out Radio, we look into the deep and dark reports of cryptids roaming around the world with me, Rob Morphy, from Cryptopia.us. I would love it if you would join me and host Dave Scott as we delve into the most arcane stories and reports regarding creatures of the unknown. My job is to hunt down the details and bring the evidence forward to you. These aren't your regular Bigfoot stories I'm talking about either. You can find out more about crypto history at spacedoutradio.com.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox. the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Morphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
Is the 24-hour world starting to wear you down? Let me from Rivulet Reiki and Ratings lend you a hand. Hi, this is Jolene, and if you're in need of Reiki or a realm reading, come to my website, rivuletrr.wix.com/rivuletrr, and let us help you out. At Rivulet, I specialize in healing your body, mind, and soul, no matter where you are. And be sure to check out the Rivulet R&R Facebook page for your best deals. Remember, it's time for you to make some time for you.
Find yourself constantly looking up in the sky, looking for answers? Have you had extraterrestrial contact? Are you an abductee? Looking for answers to your experiences? Hi there, I'm R. Keith Andrews, Spaced Out Radio's resident ET expert. Join me live the first Friday of every month where I take questions from the Spaced Out Radio chat room and help you understand those from the far-off world. It's 2 hours of knowledge every experiencer should listen to. Hope to see you there.
Did you know that Spaced Out Radio runs 7 days a week? Hi, it's James Tyson from Spaced Out Weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, you can join me and my guests for some great chatter about what's going on out in the universe, or even in that dark part of the basement you really don't want to go back into. Well, let's find the answers to your experiences together. So come on up to Uncle Jimbo's cabin on the weekend. For more information, look us up at spacedoutradio.com.
Would you like to connect with us on Spaced Out Radio? Head to spacedoutradio.com to check out the latest shows, guests, and sponsors. And don't forget to sign up for the Space Travelers Club. You'll find all you need at spacedoutradio.com. Welcome back to the final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Tomorrow night, we walk into the wilderness, talking Bigfoot with researchers Kiwani and Kelly Lapsaritis. We're going to get an interesting view of Bigfoot tomorrow night on Spaced Out Radio, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. Hey, if you're playing the social media game, you can follow us on Twitter, at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, we can be followed at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. And our website is spacedoutradio.com. While there, you can check out our SOR Spacewire. Our news director, Eric Markham, is trolling the internet for some really wacky and interesting stories happening around the world. You can also check out our blog section. We have some very talented writers there. And you can sign up for the SOR Space Travelers Club, where for $5 a month, we're going to give you access to a private section on the website for you to post your evidence or your questions. You get private group interview access. You also get your name put into a draw for monthly prize draws. The first draw will happen Friday, July 29th. We're going to give you a heck of a lot more than what the other guys do, which is just access to their archives, not us. Tonight we are talking with the crypto historian Rob Morphy on Spaced Out Radio. Rob joins us the third Wednesday of every month. Rob can be found at cryptopia.us as well as on Spreaker. And I love the name, Rob. Where did you come up with the name for your Spreaker show, Earth's Mightiest Bastards?
Well, I had a sit-down meeting with my buddy Mark Storrs, who co-owns Cryptopia.us with me, and another friend of ours, Chris Carnicelli. And Mark basically proposed the idea of doing a podcast, just a pop culture smash up, where, of course, I would bring monster stories and fun things, and, you know, we would just talk movies and whatever else was going on. And it's sort of an homage to the Earth's Mightiest Heroes, which of course are the Avengers, and our lifelong love of comic books and all sorts of pop culture. And it just sort of went to the part where we probably are going to be unfavorable about some things and kind of harsh critics, and we've been known as bastards occasionally, so we just sort of celebrated it and put it into the name.
Excellent. Let's get to a question from Joe, or make that Bill in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Do you believe, Rob, our technology is doomed to outlive us well after we are long gone?
Oh, that's a good question. I hope not. I would like to be optimistic enough to think that some form of our species, ever evolving, will continue to exist long into the future, though, obviously there's a lot of evidence to indicate that the alternative is very likely going to be the case. But that having been said, things like Voyager are going to be sailing through the cosmos for a very long time, and certainly a lot of the waste we create, be it nuclear or whatever, will linger for thousands of years. Some of it is going to just dissolve and go the way of probably past cultures. I don't think, and I know this is another subject that would probably be better handled by a guest more well-versed, but I don't think we are the first technologically advanced species, or not even species, but civilization to exist on this planet. I think perhaps just evidence of it has disappeared, but I do think, unoptimistically, our technology will probably last a lot longer than we will, though I hope that's not the case.
Let's get to another robotic-type story. In California, 1964, a place called Cisco County, September 4th to be exact. What happened there?
This is one of those really great and terrifying tales that you feel as if it should have been on a drive-in screen in 1964 rather than ostensibly real life. There was a bow hunter by the name of Donald Shrum, and he and a couple of friends were out hunting in Cisco Grove in a pretty, secluded area. At some point, Shrum got separated from his friends. It started getting dark, and he realized he was stuck by a ridge where he wouldn't be able to climb it. It was simply too steep, so he was going to have to backtrack, which would mean that he knew he'd get stuck alone in the forest at night. So he started making his way back. As he got towards a clump of trees, he heard a kind of a rustle in the bushes, and he thought it was probably a bear. So he scaled a tree that was about 12 feet of pre-branches, just like a long, narrow pole, and then the branches started coming up at about the 12 feet point. So he was fit enough to scale it up pretty quick. When he got up there, he saw a light in the distance, and what he first thought was it might be his friends with a lantern looking for him. And then he saw it go up above the trees. So his next thought was, oh, they sent a rescue search team, and this is very likely a helicopter. So he stayed up there trying to wave and get his attention. As this lit object came closer, he realized it was not a helicopter. It was this domed object that looked very much like a flying saucer, like a classic craft. So at this point, he got kind of paranoid. He climbed back down, and then he heard more rustling. So again, back up the tree. Now you got to remember, he's just clad in the clothes on his back. He's got his bow and arrow, and he sees these two humanoids, about normal, average height for a human being, in silver suits, wearing what looked like sort of gas masks with welder's goggles, and they're making their way, looking, inspecting the trees, sort of moving in kind of what he considered a foreign-like manner, like they weren't accustomed to either the gravity or the terrain. At that point, he heard something much larger and heavier, instead of moving around the shrubbery like these other two creatures, just kind of plowing directly through. And that's when, and this kind of harkens back to a comment you made earlier, Dave, he saw what is a classic humanoid robot. It had a square head, a lower jaw that detached over the entirety of the face, gears and knobs on the side of the head, two glowing eyes. And the robot seemed to approach directly towards the tree as if it knew he was there. So he's up in this tree, terrified. He realizes that these things very likely came from this illuminated object that he saw go down not far away, that was definitely not a helicopter and made no sound. The two humanoids that are dressed in silver start trying to climb over one of each other, trying to boost each other into a tree, but he said it seemed as if they were unfamiliar with how to climb a tree. And this is where things get even weirder. The robot adjusted some of the dials on the side of its head and belched this acrid smoke up towards him, up in the higher branches of the tree. He found that it started making him nauseous and black out. So while he's up in the thinner part of the tree, he was able to use his belt to loop himself to the tree so he wouldn't fall. He did this just in time before he fell unconscious. He woke up a few seconds later, at least what it seemed like a few seconds, and these things were still at the bottom of the tree trying to get up. He shot some arrows down at what he described as a robot, and apparently it bounced off this thing's chest plate with sparks, indicating that it was made of metal. So basically this turns into a long and terrifying night where these creatures are trying to climb up. Every time he shoots an arrow at them, they back up a little, and the robot ejects more of this like acrid, horrible smoke that knocks him unconscious. At this point, Shrum begins to light parts of his clothes on fire. He sets his jacket on fire and drops it. This makes the entities and the robot back up for a minute before they come back. His hat catches fire, and apparently that blazes up big because of his hair gel. So he ends up half naked in a tree, freezing. Finally, a second robot identical to the first shows up. They face each other chest to chest. Some sparks begin to interchange between the two. They both release a huge plume of smoke. At this point, Donald Trump is knocked unconscious, and he doesn't wake up until dawn the next day. They're gone at this point. The object is gone. The two humanoids are gone. The two robots are gone. He finally gets himself together enough, climbs down the tree. He's freezing because he is down to just T-shirts and pants at this point. He begins to walk through the woods. He sees smoke and becomes terrified, starts to go for the tree again. Then he realizes it's just his leftover jacket still smoldering. And thankfully, soon after, he is discovered by his friends who were out looking for him, one of whom actually saw an object take off just a few hours before, so that kind of confirmed what he had to say. But this just is one of those stories that obviously a lot of people seem to be skeptical about until they actually spoke to Shrum. And a lot of investigators said they really came away with a sincere sense of terror. And it's very difficult not to be able to put yourself in his shoes when somebody has to be strapped to a tree, terrified they're going to fall unconscious into the hands of these people or these creatures, and no idea what their intentions are, who are clearly hell-bent on either getting him down or knocking him out. And it turns into one of the more terrifying ordeals I've ever encountered dealing with a human being interacting with an ostensibly extraterrestrial robot.
How weak must he have felt, Donald Shrum, when here he is firing his crossbow arrows, and those things are lightning fast, they're lightning sharp, and they are just bouncing off. He must have felt like the only man in the world at that point.
Oh, terrifying. I mean, I can't imagine to know that the only thing keeping you from toppling out of a tree and maybe breaking your neck, much less a worse fate in the hands of these creatures, is just a belt that's desperately clinging you to the narrow portion of a top of a tall, thin tree. I mean, I don't know. I mean, when you're setting your own clothes on fire in the hopes that you could just dissuade these things to leave you alone, and you do have no hope of rescue, these things are constantly trying to get up at you. You never know when they're going to make it up to the branch level, and thankfully they were too small and just, I guess, too inexperienced at climbing trees to manage to do it. And he never fell, again, thankfully, but that night must have been the very longest of his life.
Did he ever talk about the ordeal afterwards, or was it one of these things where he gave his initial investigation and then he was done?
No, he's come out. I think there was, at first he was very reticent to talk about it, and the first reports I read were from the 1960s and books like the Humanoids and other books that chronicled these things, and he was just known by his initials, and only a handful of investigators heard about it. But as the years have gone on, he's been more willing to come forward. Obviously, we know his real name now, and he's given a pretty explicit description of what happened that night. But even investigators as famous as J. Allen Hynek, felt that there was some authenticity to this. And again, you wonder why it's basically a sci-fi robot and these two apparent handlers that were basically humanoid in shape, but in no way could you see a face, beneath what seemed to be respirators with eye goggles and, puffy suits, which might represent, atmospheric pressure suits. It's just a terrifying thought, because you can't help. The first time I read this, I couldn't help but just imagine myself freezing at the top of this tree, knowing that, say, your arrows are ineffective, knowing that you can only set your own clothes on fire to kind of get them away for a few minutes at a time, and just thinking that the inevitable is going to happen, that eventually they're going to get up there or you're going to fall down. And I can't imagine what a relief he must have felt the next day when he was rescued.
Bob has an interesting question in the SOR Space Travelers. How do we know these robot attacks are not the boys at Area 51 goofing around?
Well, we don't is the short answer. We have no idea, but my assumption would be this, though I can't definitively say that these are extraterrestrial. What would be the ultimate, agenda for somebody working with high technology in either a DARPA program or Area 51 to basically torment a random hunter? Like, I'm not sure what the benefits of that would be. I'm not saying it's beyond the pale, but to spend the time it would take to use technology as valuable as this for something as seemingly inconsequential as treeing a terrified and lost hunter, it doesn't make much sense to me. I don't know really where these robots come from. I don't know what their overriding agenda is, but I would really hope that the U.S. government would have better things to do with their time and money than to torment random people in the woods.
So when he said that smoke started coming up from this robot-like being, did he ever describe what it smelled like?
Yes, it was an acrid smell. It was just unpleasant. It reminded me a lot of the way Robert Taylor described the smoke that came out of the sea mine robots that attacked him, in Scotland, which we were talking about in the last half hour. So, to me, again, this is it's establishing a pattern, and the pattern is that these robots tend to use, because you don't really hear about it too much. You do hear about biological entities being able to render their victims unconscious through means that are inexplicable. But the fact that these robotic beings tend to emit a visible vapor that has a distinct smell and that directly correlates with rendering their quarry unconscious, to me that's helping to build a case pattern, which is not to say that these things have anything to do with each other, but you have to wonder why they're employing this technique.
Oh, absolutely. And, obviously it was powerful and potent enough to knock him flat out. Does he know if he was taken, or was he just left up there and put back?
That's something I don't know. And that's something that's really worth looking into. He might have been hypnotized afterward and maybe no, because once he was knocked officially unconscious, when the two robots came together and emitted this large cloud of vapor, it's a possibility. And of course, a lot of people that have been abducted end up precisely where they were left off, though sometimes at a slight distance. But I think there's I can't say, I don't know for sure. They might have just basically let him be once he was finally unconscious. Maybe that was their overriding agenda, but I'm not sure, to be honest.
How did they notice that he was up there?
That's interesting. Did the robot have some sort of infrared technology or some sort of radar-type technology that detects Terminator-like living creatures? Why did they feel threatened by this person? I mean, they clearly were trying to get at him before he even fired arrows down at the robot. So what was their reason, and why were they worried? Or were they just curious? Were they just trying to have some sort of interaction and sort of like, I spent a lot of time playing in creeks when I was a kid, and every time I tried to catch a salamander, that thing did not want to be caught. I had no intention of hurting it, but I was a big, horrible-looking monster, and it was a scared animal. And maybe it's a case just as simple as that, where they had no nefarious intentions, but were terrifying nonetheless to the creature that they were, trying to get a hold of. I just don't know. But But I think that the robot was the first. I don't think the two humanoid creatures noticed him first. I think it was the robot. So something in the robot's machinations recognized that there was a human being in the tree.
That is just way too weird. Do we know what part of California, and being Canadian, I don't know where Cisco County is, without looking on it. It's in Placer County, Cisco Grove, Placer County.
Is in Placer County. You know what? I don't actually know.
Northern? I would assume northern if it's near the trees. There's many trees halfway down.
No. Let's see. It's near Emigrant Gap. I am ashamed to say I don't know.
Well, we're going to have to Google this one. Definitely going to have to Google this one because now I'm curious. Curious to see where this is. Was that his one and only sighting that he had, or was he a victim of more sightings after that?
None that I know of. But after that, what more would you need? This is one I'm still in the thick of researching. I know it's a classic case, but it's one of the ones that I came across after I decided to do the Amazing Automatons category. So the event is what I'm most familiar with. And before I finish the article, I will definitely, have all the research on what he's encountered after, but I'm not sure if he ever has had another one. This might be one of those cases where it was one and done, but enough to last a lifetime.
Okay, just looking at a map here, it looks like it's on Highway 80 leading to Reno, Sparks, and then you would hang a right at Truckee to go down to Lake Tahoe. So that's in, I believe, Joe Allgaier country, one of our listeners. I'm assuming. I've actually traveled that highway. That's kind of interesting. Very interesting indeed.
Right on.
Yeah. Did that a number of years ago when we were going to play a hockey tournament in Las Vegas. We drove down and cut through Sacramento over to Reno and then south. So very interesting that it would take place because it looks pretty mountainous, that area.
Oh, definitely. And isolated areas like that obviously are ripe for encounters for whatever reason. Be they shy or willing to or desiring to remain clandestine. Obviously, most encounters like this take place in very isolated areas.
Were there other UFO sightings in the area around that time?
Besides the fact that one of his friends who was hunting with him actually saw the same object take off, none that I've heard of.
Wow.
But that lends corroboration to Shrum's testimony, to be sure.
We have about 6 minutes before we got to go to break here, our final break of the night. I want to start getting into the La Rubia incident.
Ah, yes. Now, this is a really interesting one. This is an actual abduction incident that comes back from 1977, September 15th to be exact. And at about 2:30 a.m., a bus driver by the name of Antonio La Rubia saw what he described as a lead-colored hat-shaped object, which was 250 feet across, so this thing is colossal. And it was resting in a field not far from his home. So when he went out to take a better look at this thing, as anyone would, curious, he saw three entities which he described as robots. These things quickly surrounded him. They sort of like were floating, and this is how they were described, and this is fascinating. They were about 4 feet tall. They had long antennas spinning on top of football-shaped heads, and by football I mean if it were like end-to-end, like when you're about to kick it, so like diamond shape going vertically. The antennas on top looked a little bit like a teaspoon. They had a horizontal band of what looked like blue-tinted mirrors running around the circumference of the head, which he took to be basically eyes. Their bodies were made of what he described as scales the color of dull aluminum, and it had two arms that tapered into a single finger-like appendage that looked what he said were basically looked like elephant trunks. All three of these creatures had a belt with what looked like syringes attached to it, and this is perhaps most interesting, the bottom of their torsos tapered to a single unipodal leg that ended on sort of like a bar stool flat sort of surface. Yes. You can see the actual illustrations online of what he basically saw, and some really good artistic interpretations other people have done, and they are just beyond compare. Like, no one has ever really described anything that looks remotely like this. So these things surround him. They hover. Whatever that bottom thing was, it was anti-gravitational, and basically they came around him, approached him with one of these syringes, and were able to teleport him into this ship. Once he got in there, this is really interesting. He was in a chamber that was circular, and he was surrounded by what he said were 24 additional robots of the exact same description. So he, in terror, screamed, "What do you want? Who are you?" And without warning, all of the robots collapsed to the floor at the sound of his voice, and they held these pointy appendages to the top of their head as if somehow that was their hearing receptacle, and the sound of his voice was actually detrimental to them, which I think is very interesting. At which point, one of the robots got up, extracted some blood from him. Another one put him in front of an object that looked like a technologically advanced piano, which is a weird description. And as they pressed keys, he began to see images of a UFO factory where these robots were actually building a fleet of similar UFOs. And interestingly enough, a lot of other strange images like La Rubia in the nude and trains going through tunnels. But this is really weird. One image of a dog barking at one of the robots and the robot melting as that happened. After this happened, they basically knocked him unconscious, and the next thing La Rubia remembered was waking up in the middle of a street and seeing a large, dark, balloon-like object ascending above him. Apparently somebody else nearby actually saw it as well, though they were a known alcoholic and their word was taken with a grain of salt, but at least he had some eyewitness corroboration. So this is the strange and, frankly, off-putting in many ways case of Antonio La Rubia.
How credible was this guy?
Difficult to ascertain after all of these years. Yeah, a lot of people covered it. It was a really unique case. Some pretty prestigious investigators got in on it. But it's one of those ones where it's almost... See, this is where your first instinct, of course, like mine is, to be like, oh my God, this is just too bizarre for words. But then you have to ask yourself, why is this more bizarre than a gray? I mean, aliens would have no reason to look like us. They would have no reason to build technology that resembles us. Who knows? The one thing I will give it, and this is obviously never having a chance to have spoken to La Rubia or anything else, is that even if the other eyewitness that saw the UFO taking off was a drunkard, it is still one other person to have seen something, which is a lot more than you get in a lot of UFO abduction cases. Does that mean that I'm a wholesale believer in this event? No. No, not at all. But does it mean I'm intrigued by it? Absolutely. Absolutely. If I were nearer in time and place, I would absolutely have investigated this. But, you know, this is a long time ago in Brazil, and so it's difficult to cover, but I find this description of these robots, and I would charge all of your listeners to find a picture of them online. They are absolutely astonishing to look at.
On that note, we're going to hop out for our final break of the night. More of the La Rubia incident with the crypto historian Rob Morphy from Cryptopia.us and Earth's Mightiest Bastards. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. Be back right after this.
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there. I'm Butch Witkowski from your 4-Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio?
Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us.
From the radio, commercials, to banners, to social media.
Have a product you'd like our host to endorse? We can do that too.
Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry.
Right here, this is where we divulge the fruit of our research. Here on the Webster Phenomena every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern on Spaced Out Radio.
Attention Spaced Out Radio listeners. For only $5 a month, you can join Spaced Out Radio Space Travelers. Your membership at spacedoutradio.com will give you access to private fan area on the website, get you a monthly newsletter, draws for monthly swag, and a whole lot more. Sign up today to become a part of the Spaced Out Radio experience.
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Morphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
Greetings and salutations, space travelers, from the Chronicles of the Unknown team.
What is Chronicles of the Unknown? I keep hearing about this thing.
It's a new paranormal reality TV show based right here in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. Follow our team as we uncover claims of activity on the Caribou Gold Rush Trail. You can also follow us here every third Monday, where two members of our team will be available to answer your questions. We'll give you some equipment updates and some of our experiences on the road, right here on Spaced Out Radio.
Did you know that Spaced Out Radio runs 7 days a week? Hi, it's James Tyson from Spaced Out Weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, you can join me and my guests for some great chatter about what's going on out in the universe, or even in that dark part of the basement you really don't want to go back into. Well, let's find the answers to your experiences together. So come on up to Uncle Jimbo's cabin on the weekend. For more information, look us up at spacedoutradio.com.
Missed most of tonight's show? Don't worry, you didn't miss a thing. You can head to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and download our archives for free. And don't forget to get your Space Travelers membership today. Now, back to tonight's show. We've rounded third. We are heading for home tonight on Spaced Out Radio. Good to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the show, we're going to be talking Bigfoot with researchers Kelly and Kiwani Lapsaritis. We're going to get an interesting take on their belief of what Bigfoot really is. That's tomorrow night on the mighty SOR, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. Always good to have you with us. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, I can be followed at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. And, of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. If you haven't been there yet, we've updated absolutely everything, giving you more features to look at, including who we affiliate ourselves with. So check them out, whether they're paranormal, cryptid, like cryptopia.us, whether they're alien, Bigfoot, or some other quality radio stations that are broadcasting that you should probably have a listen to. You can also read any of our blogs from our talented writers, as well as check out the SOR Space Wire. Our news director, Eric Markham, has news stories on the wire every single day. And, of course, you could join the SOR Space Travelers Club for just $5 a month. You get a private section on our website. You get access to private group interviews, along with monthly prize draws that you are automatically entered in. That's just $5 a month. Sign up for the SOR Space Travelers today. Our guest tonight, for the final time, is Rob Morphy from Earth's Mightiest Bastards, as well as Cryptopia.us. Rob, it's always a pleasure to have you with us.
Pleasure's entirely mine, Dave.
My friend, right before the break, we were talking about the Larubia incident. And in this incident, those robotic creatures, I mean, that's right out of a sci-fi film where they stand on almost like a bar stool leg. And how were they moving around? Did Larubia ever report how they moved?
It seems like sort of an anti-gravitational thing. I mean, he was no physicist, and I don't think he could explain any better than we could. But they seem to be gliding around on this, a bar stool is like a perfect analogy. Their bodies tapered into a long pole-like structure with like a flattened end, which is just like a barber's chair or bar stool or something, and they just tended to glide on it. So I think they must have had some sort of propulsion system, perhaps something we don't even know of, or at least variations on technology maybe that we have, and but they managed to get along pretty well. They weren't impeded by this as one might think they should be.
How long was he gone for?
Well, the incident took place starting at about 2:20 a.m. And let's think here. I'm not sure exactly when he showed back up. It was later that evening, to be sure, and when he woke up in the road. So there's a missing time factor. I think it was about 2:55. So I guess less than a half hour. But plenty of things happened during that period.
He has a lot of recollection of what happened. And when I hear a story like this that is so far out there, it often makes me curious as to how he's able to remember so much of this, because so many times we hear people when they are abducted, they don't remember a thing, they just knew what happened, unless they go through some sort of hypnosis, regression therapy. Did he go through regression to understand what happened to him, or did he just recollect everything from the start? Because this story does sound very, very easy to be manipulated.
It does, definitely, and it definitely seems to have a lot of sci-fi elements, but to the best of my knowledge, he just had this in his mind as if it were an actual memory of something he'd been through, which makes me wonder if, because most of the problems with faded memories and alien abduction, and I know it goes across the board and has since Betty and Barney Hill, the first real famous abduction scenario, but most of these tend to tie in with what we know as gray aliens. And I wonder if perhaps different species or different incarnations, in the case of non-living creatures, might have different protocols when they're interacting with human beings, and maybe it is primarily the Greys' agenda to erase your memory, but there was definitely a lot of contactee, reports, especially hailing from the 50s and 60s, where people would meet tall, statuesque, human-like aliens with long, flowing blonde hair, and you probably remember how common that used to be. And these people would not have any memory lapse. They just remember their interactions. A lot of people take these reports with a grain of salt, but then, you have to take everything with a skeptical eye, as we said earlier. But to me, there only seem to be certain species that tend to really try to impede your memory, and others, for whatever reason, just let it lie.
He mentioned seeing the other robots on the ship that he was on, that he was taken on. Was there any other type of humanoid type alien beings or other humans that he maybe mentioned or failed to mention in the report?
Not that I've ever heard of. I think it was just these robots, and I think it's interesting that he saw images of factories filled, or what he described as a factory filled with these robots building other UFOs, which makes you wonder, is this maybe a silicon-based species? Is this an alien species that kind of like a Dalek is trapped within some sort of metallic armor for whatever reason, for its own safety? Or is it a self-aware species of robots that are, building themselves, building machines to traverse the universe and explore for whatever agenda they may have? I find it fascinating that they showed him that image, though, whether or not whatever their agenda was and whether or not it's a true image, why are they implanting that in his head, this idea that they're building ships en masse?
Has that species ever been seen in other locations, do we know?
Oh, no, never that I've ever come across. And obviously I make it a point to read as much of the literature as I can. This is a unique and frankly bizarre encounter with there's been other one-legged species. There's been other things that have variations of what's going on here, but this is a absolutely unique encounter.
What made his story so credible to the people in the area and the investigators in the area?
I think it's just the people that knew him. Like in so many of these cases, if somebody is known to be a prankster or a liar or just unreliable in general, folks will suss that out. They'll let investigators know that that this guy is not somebody we genuinely trust, and so maybe you should take his story with a grain of salt. And in like the cases with Bob Taylor and others that we've talked about tonight and the other nights, when people speak up for you, that usually is a really strong testimony to your character. Because for someone else to go out on a limb, and not just a spouse, say, or a child, which you would hope would be biased for you anyway, but other people in your community, people that have are risking their own reputations by protecting yours. That isn't going to guarantee that the story you're getting is true, but it does lend some credibility.
Now, a lot of these stories that are happening, and they're a long time ago, is there a trend that we see with this type of technology? Because this story, for instance, if we use this one exclusively, as we stated, it sounds right out of a sci-fi flick where, he's on the spaceship and they sit there, and when he starts talking, they immediately point these antennae at him. When I look at these stories and I see what was happening in the 60s and 70s, and I've gone back and looked, they always seem so not as advanced in their technology as you would seem them to be. And that's why I wonder about a story like this, about the credibility of the person.
Well, of course, that has to be a factor. But again, kind of like what we were talking earlier, there is a theory that suggests that some of our perceptions about particularly extraterrestrial encounters, but other encounters, are filtered from our own perceptions and imaginations. But leaving that aside for a moment, one of the problems is that we've grown so accustomed to say in the post Whitley Strieber world, and with good reason, with lots of corroborating evidence, to the idea that there's legitimacy in a gray alien scenario. Though a lot of folks could probably, and legitimately you could say from a skeptical point of view, be sort of regurgitating what has been a part of pop culture for so many decades, though I tend to think there's a lot of authenticity in many of the stories I've heard personally and encountered otherwise. So when you get these offshoot strange stories, the first instinct is to say, well, there's not a lot of corroboration. In fact, there's none beyond this guy's account. Why should we take it seriously? Well, the reason we should take it seriously, or at least give it its day in court, is because, first off, there's no reason to assume that it's a lie any more than something more traditional like a gray alien account, and secondly, because somebody else did see a UFO, and thirdly, because the people that surround him validate sort of his honesty. Now, none of that guarantees that this happened, and I understand why, and you should have reservations, and I have extreme reservations about cases like this, but it's these strange cases that really, where you have to make yourself take pause and look at it a little deeper, because just because it's less common doesn't mean it's less likely.
Claudia has a question in the SOR Space Travelers room. Rob, do you think robots or ETs are using mind control on us? Have you ever spoken to David Jacobs about this?
I have not spoken to David Jacobs about this. And, of course, I think that there's a real chance that they are. I mean, we would use psychological different methods of manipulating our enemies or our friends or people that we are studying psychologically, and our governments have been doing so forever. So why would Why would extraterrestrials not employ the same things, especially if they're trying in their own way to make it less traumatic for us? But yeah, I think there's a lot of indication to think that as much of the phenomenon is real, it's also in our heads, and that it's events that are kind of transpiring in our perceptions of them rather than just things that are physically happening. I think it's a combination of the two, and I think it probably involves technology and things that are way beyond our grasp at this point.
That is just absolutely amazing. Hey, let's move on to one more topic. We have time for probably one more here. And of course, I love my Canadian UFOs and my Canadian extraterrestrial encounters. You did one in a previous report from last year that we've never talked about. I need to know about the Garson invaders.
Those things are fascinating, absolutely fascinating. This happened at a mine field. It got famous in the Project Blue Book files back in the day. It was covered pretty extensively, and this goes back to July 2nd, 1954, when a miner who was basically doing painting duties on the location of the mine named La Sarza saw an object descending from the sky several times faster than what he was comfortable with. It was a saucer, and it landed near him, and basically what he saw were, and these are crazy creatures, 13-foot tall, greenish-blue, spider-legged, gargantuan entities that had one cycloptic eye in the middle of their head and weird ear-like appendages that looked like cowboy spurs. They also had crab-like claws, which is kind of bringing us back to the triangle from earlier. And they're just basically, I drew an illustration of them, so if anyone wants to see it, they can go to the Garson invaders on cryptopia.us and see my illustration. But they're kind of insectoid, kind of mollusk-like weird things. But these things terrified La Sarza, obviously, and they asked him to do something, and this is really interesting. They asked him to perform a task, the nature of which, and I'm quoting here, he has stoutly refused to divulge, even to officialdom. He was emphatic that he would rather die than do what he asked them to do. He was so terrified by what these 13-foot bizarre semi-insectoid greenish-blue aliens asked him to do that he asked to be incarcerated, probably on the futile hopes that somehow if he was in jail, these aliens would not be able to get to him, nor would he be forced to do whatever evil thing they asked. He never revealed what it was that he would rather die than do, but to me this always kind of left me with some haunting questions. A, these creatures are absolutely terrifying, both in size, scope, and biological makeup, and B, the fact that they would propose something, just like a simple workaday, he was an immigrant, moved to Canada, Ennio La Sarza is his name, and he was just doing his day's work when suddenly he is confronted by this unreal and terrifying extraterrestrial entity that is demanding of him something that is just reprehensible to his sensibility, and I guess the mystery of that has always kind of haunted me.
Whereabouts in Canada did this one take place?
There was the Garson mine. You'd probably be able to help me better with this.
I'm trying to think here off the top of my head. I don't.
Let's see. The first report was from the Sudbury Daily Star.
Okay, so Ontario.
Okay.
Yeah, it happened mid-Ontario then.
Yep, Sudbury, Ontario. Yeah. No, I write these, but you can only have so much of an encyclopedia memory of this stuff. But
you got to know your North America, man. Come on. Come on.
North America. Don't be so biased. The rest of the world. But anyway, this is really a fascinating case, and just the appearance of this creature alone is what really sucked me in when I was young and first read about it. And the older I get, the more that I'm intrigued by is what it was that they asked him to do, and that he was just terrified by the prospect of.
What did he say? I believe the gentleman's name was Ennio La Sarza. What did he say about the ship? Before he saw the creatures, what did he see that led him to that area?
Okay. He said that it hurtled from the sky with several times the speed of a jet plane. He thought it would crash, but it slowed down and ended up just hovering above the ground. It was a huge disc that was about 25 feet in diameter and a set of portholes or the equivalent around it.
And I think we just lost Rob. Sounded like his phone just hung up. Let's try and get Rob back here on Spaced Out Radio. It's always happening during the good stuff. That's twice something strange has happened. We'll get Rob back here momentarily. Sounded like
Sorry about that. I got disconnected.
Yeah, I can tell. Somebody doesn't like us talking about this again.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. It's crazy. It just disconnected.
Maybe we should not do the UFO talk anymore because that's twice.
I've got to finish it though. Besides the UFO and the set of portals, it had a retractable antenna on top, which I find to be fairly unique because you don't often hear about that. So this thing scorched in for a landing, which terrified him, and then suddenly, in a way that obviously terrestrial aircraft cannot do, at least to the best knowledge we have of aerodynamics, suddenly cushioned itself to a stop and then came in for a landing.
Intense.
Yes.
Was it lighting up like a lot of UFOs where they have the different lights going on, or was this just a solid maybe white object streaking across the sky, or that weird luminescent orange color that many people have seen?
He just said it was coming with amazing speed, but never mentioned any sort of illumination, be it color or white. So it looked just like a solid object to the best of at least the testimony that, I've read the Blue Book files and, read the newspaper reports from the day, and none of those mention any illumination, just an object that was coming in so fast that he thought it was going to crash at first, and then it ended up softening to a landing.
And then the creatures. I mean, that's just an amazing, amazing type creature in order to see 13 feet high, man. Like the one I saw was between 10 to 12 feet, and it was thin like a beanstalk. So, I mean, to all of a sudden see this creature at 13 feet high that looks like a giant beetle with one eye.
Yeah.
I mean, that's enough to give you nightmares the rest of your life. No wonder he wanted to go to prison to make sure that it would never happen again.
Oh, absolutely. And, I mean, first off, they had this kind of like a greenish blue color, but he went on to say that their bodies seemed to glow, and they had a single eye in the center of the forehead, which we said before, and that the hands were equipped with crab-like claws that opened and closed spasmodically. So bad enough, all the rest of it, bad enough that it seems to be oscillating in colors, primarily blue and green, but that you have these kind of spastically closing and opening claws, which always seems intimidating. It's scary when it's a hermit crab to a degree and your toes are exposed. It's certainly going to be terrifying when it's attached to a 13-foot, multicolored cycloptic alien.
Well, all I'm saying is we need that garlic butter again tonight.
Oh, absolutely. These things are going to be delicious.
Oh, absolutely. I'm willing to crack open them shells, but you imagine the size chuckers you need in order to get through that?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you're going to need some heavy industrial equipment to actually probably crack that shell.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let's go with one more here from Cryptopia.us because we have about 6 minutes left, so we're going to have to make it quick. Let's go down to Oregon in the United States. The alien ape man.
Yeah, this is an odd one. This is definitely an odd one. And it's kind of scary, too, because, again, it deals with a teenager who's home alone. 1965. It happened in Madras, Oregon. And the teenager was just hanging out at home. His parents were out. And he heard a noise outside of his home. So he got up, looked out the window, and saw what he described as a UFO descending with strange lights onto the ground. He heard some strange sounds. He wasn't sure what was going on. Then he glanced towards his front door, and he saw the silhouette of a primate, like a gorilla, just hovering there, sort of like a huge Bigfoot, but it had chains strapped across its chest, which is sort of like the comic book villain Gorilla Grodd or something, for anyone that's familiar with the old Flash comic. And it was just staring at him through the screen door. And he assumed, understandably, that it must have something to do with the UFO, though, I mean, who knows? Though the other suggestion that other people have made that is that it might be just a coincidental Bigfoot encounter, though the chains wrapped around the chest would seem to negate that, because I've never heard of any Sasquatch wearing any sort of jewelry or accoutrement. But anyway, this thing stood in the door, stared at him, and thankfully did not rip through and try to attack him or anything. You know, it just ended up being a sighting that he glanced at and survived. But I can only imagine how terrifying it must have been for those few minutes between seeing a UFO and then a giant Bigfoot-like space invader hovering in your door.
See, the first thing when you tell me this story, Oregon is very well known for its Bigfoot encounters. And to hear this, you know, take away the chains, like you said, it totally sounds Bigfootish, if that's a word, to me.
Sure. It does to me, too. I mean, that was my first I mean, obviously there are some, granted tenuous, associations between UFO encounters and Bigfoot encounters. And there's always the chance, a very, very thin chance, that a sighting of a UFO could coincide with a sighting of a Bigfoot, and they could have nothing to do with each other. The one variable that's slung into this case is the chain. The chains wrapped around his chest. That makes no sense unless it was some sort of escaped circus animal that happened to coincide with a UFO sighting, which seems even equally bizarre, if not more so. But the case doesn't really go anywhere. Like most of these things, it's a fascinating stolen moment in time, and like a lot of these cases, I'm interested in that. I put myself in the shoes of the eyewitness and try to like figure how I would feel in those shoes, and it would be terrifying. I mean, to be alone, you know, without your parents, to see a UFO land, it's quite scary enough, but to have this brute outside of your door, not knowing if, you know, you're about to be torn limb from limb, and again, thankfully nothing happened. I can't imagine what that 1-2 punch must have done to his perception of the world.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Do you think the chains could have been made up in order to make it a little bit more freaky? Because if we take the path of Bigfoot on this story, it sounds very logical compared to where he lives. But I mean, let's face it, teenagers sometimes do see things. They still have that childlike imagination, and it is very possible that he made up the chains or maybe saw some sort of light reflection to give it a chain-like look.
I would be more inclined to think it would be an incorrect perception, because to me, you're already, and I agree, you know, yes, sometimes teenagers can be prone to exaggeration and whatnot, but you're already describing a UFO and a Bigfoot-like creature. I don't see how your story is going to be enhanced much by chains. Like, that almost seems incidental. Like, that's the most prosaic part of the story, and it just adds a kind of strange wrinkle to the whole thing. So in my opinion, it's either something that he saw and we just have to figure it in and try to suss out what it means, or it was an incorrect perception, because of all the things to lie about, that to me would be about the last thing I would choose.
Exactly. And on that note, we have about a minute left with you, Mr. Morphy from Cryptopia.us. Tell our fans and listeners where they can find Cryptopia.us. I know it's a website, but what they'll find on there, and where they can find Earth's Mightiest Bastards.
Well, what you'll find on Cryptopia.us is now 14 categories covering anything from lake monsters, sea monsters, Bigfoot-type creatures, aliens, aquatic humanoids, flying monsters, just the whole gamut, and now amazing automatons. We're going to get a whole plethora of robot articles up. We're going to start delving into some ESP things and other paranormal mysteries that aren't necessarily associated directly with cryptozoology, so I'm really excited about that. And for those that want to listen to the podcast, Earth's Mightiest Bastards, check out EMB Pod. embpod.com, and it's free on iTunes, Spreaker, so and you can just listen to it right off the website. It is not work safe, but it's fun and definitely over the top. And anyone wants to hear some other crazy monster stories, and it's basically a pop culture mashup. Please feel free to enjoy it. And as always, Dave, thank you so much for having me on. It's one of the great highlights of my month.
It's always great to have you on, and we will have you on again on August 17th, the third Wednesday of the month. Rob Morphy, thank you so much. You hold on. I'm going to take the time to shut things down here. I'll talk to you in just a second. Rob Morphy, Cryptopia.us, Earth's Mightiest Bastards, and one of the best beards you will see going in the cryptid world right there. And you know what? He is one hell of a nice guy, too. If you ever get a chance to talk to him on social media or in person, Rob is one of those gems of a human being that just will, you'll be better off in life knowing that you got an opportunity to meet him. Cryptopia.us. You can also find it by going to spacedoutradio.com on the homepage. Scroll on down, as well as on the affiliates page as well. And Mark Storrs, I know you're listening. Thanks, buddy, for taking part in the chat room tonight. Appreciate that. Mark is one of Rob's partners in Earth's Mightiest Bastards. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like. Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, I can be followed at Dave Scott SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. And, of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. While you're there, take the time to join the SOR Space Travelers. It's just $5 a month, and we're giving back to you. Private sections on our website, private group interviews. You're going to be entered to monthly draws just because you're a space traveler. Do it today or tomorrow. Get in there, though. Tomorrow night on the show, we're talking Bigfoot, and it's going to be a different look at Sasquatch. Kiwani and Kelly Lapseritis will be our guests tomorrow night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. I will be back in exactly 21 hours from now. I hope you are too. Mr. Bumblefoot, take us home. Good night.
Stay in line, don't make a mistake. We're watching. We watched you.